emeritus. She previously served as a professor of forest management and silviculture at the University of Maine in Orono. Before that, she was an assistant professor of forestry at the University of Maine in Fort Kent. She and her husband live in Hamden with their 3-year-old. They have family-owned woodlands in Topsfield and Belfast, and she really will help reinforce our connection with the University of Maine School of Forestry. The second new nominee for a board position is Jeff Turling. I've known Jeff for many years. He's a retired arborist for the city of Portland, who currently serves as the urban forestry education specialist with Maine Audubon. He is also the tree warden for the town of Cape Elizabeth. And when he was working for Portland, I mean, he was legendary. He was just a guy who knew everything about urban forests that one needed to know. He was a tremendous help. As a city arborist, Jeff stewarded over 20,000 public shade and park trees and over 1,000 acres of public forest land. He now lives in South Portland. So I would appreciate it if someone would nominate the officers and the proposed new board members as a slate. Doug. Great. Thank you. Doug Baston makes the nomination. Second, thank you very much. That, yes. Move the nominations be closed. Is there a second to that? There is. All in favor? Thank you very much. On the motion to elect the slate of officers and new members of the board, all in favor? Any opposed? It appears to be unanimous. Thank you very much. That helps us get on to our next item here. Let's see. Go to Seth. Yes, right. Seth Sprague is going to go over the financial condition, do the treasurer's report. Come on up, Seth.
Good morning, everybody. I am presenting the treasurer's report on behalf of our treasurer, John Melrose, who is unable to be here today. And John is the able chairman of the Finance Committee, which includes Richard Nass, Mark Doty, and myself. And he prepared some bullet point items for you that may end up on the screen if we get the screens working, but I'll work through his presentation. And my summary of his presentation is that your organization, I am pleased to report, is in good, sound financial condition. 2024 saw increased donor support, improved stumpage revenues, and significant new support from NRCS. We increased our dues for the first time since 2016, and we saw that the membership remained stable. There's no great rebellion against the small increase in dues. That's good. And we also are finishing up a successful annual appeal, and the Standish Land Acquisition Fund looks like it's going to be a success as well. John wanted to note that as we look at our balance sheet, about 70% of the assets of our organization are now held in the land trust. Basically, the lands that we've accumulated in the trust represent a big slug of our balance sheet. Reviewing some of the specific financial results, we operate on a fiscal year that ends April 30th. Here we are at our annual meeting in January, 8 months after the end of our fiscal year and 4 months before the end of our next fiscal year. So what we decided to do was give you some information about the last fiscal year, how that ended, and the 12 months that ended in January for the calendar year, ended in December for the calendar year. And one of the challenges that the Finance Committee deals with in monitoring our financial health is the fact that the timing of some of our big revenue items and big expense items doesn't flow evenly through the year. It bumps up and down with big numbers but that make it hard at any one moment to assess how we're doing. But in the fiscal year that ended last April, our total revenues were 798,000. That number keeps creeping up every year. So we're a growing organization. And in that fiscal year, those revenues exceeded our expenses by a healthy $26,000. However, when you look at our balance sheet, our net assets actually went down at the end of, during that fiscal year by almost 240,000. And it really was the result of the state changing its valuations for the tree growth. You might have seen it in your own properties. And we carry our land trust properties on our books at this tree growth value. So when the state reduces that value, it affects our balance sheet. Doesn't really affect our operations, but it does cause a drop in the value of our net assets. And our net assets were $3.2 million at the end of April 24. And that was a $239,000 decrease because of that, largely because of the tree growth reduction in value. In our calendar year that just ended in December, our net assets grew by almost 400,000 in that calendar year. And our revenues exceeded expenses by 268,000. Well, that is great, but one of the challenges we have to look at why you have these big swings. And we received a big NRCS payment for work that we've been doing over an extended period of time, came in right at the end of the year. So that payment increases our net assets, but we know that over time that balances out, smooths out. But at that moment, it looks great. But the overall trend for the organization is positive. We see increasing, as I said at the beginning, donor support, stumpage revenues, and so I'm pleased to report that we're doing very well as an organization. One of the questions we like to answer or provide is how we're funded and where we're spending our money. And that pie chart over there gives you an idea of that. And I would stress that we really depend on our members. The dues at 12.5%, annual appeal at 17.8%, and money contributed to our land fund represent almost half of our total revenues. Okay. And our the next slide, I think I got it.
You got that. Where does the money go?
Where does the money go? This pie chart shows that half of our revenues go for personnel. That's clearly the biggest number. And we have a land trust expenses, professional fees as well. And the last slide is our annual appeal. And as I said at the beginning, it looks like we've made our goal. But if you haven't already made a contribution, it's not too late. It will go into our fiscal year, which ends on April 30th. So in summary and in closing, the Finance Committee believes that we're in good financial shape as we enter into our 50th year. Thank you. That's the Treasurer's report, Tom.
Thank you, Seth. If any of you have questions for Seth, please talk to him when there's a break in the action here. We want to go straight now to yes, thank you. The Maine Outstanding Tree Farmer of the Year announcement. And that we're going to call to the stage Brian Logan Johnson of Maine Tree Farm, right? Okay, Cody. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Cody LaChance. I'm the Somerset County Chair for the Maine Tree Farm Program. Thank you very much for joining us as we celebrate the incredible dedication, stewardship demonstrated by Maine's community of tree farmers. The Outstanding Tree Farm of the Year Award is a prestigious recognition that honors family forest owners who exemplify excellence in sustainable forest management, balancing ecological integrity with economic viability. Since 1954, this award has recognized individuals or families who have gone above and beyond in their commitment to conserving our natural resources while fostering the health and productivity of their woodland areas. They show how responsible stewardship enhances biodiversity and improves ecological resilience while providing sustainable wood products and recreational spaces. Furthermore, these remarkable individuals serve as role models within their communities, providing education and guidance to fellow landowners about best practices in forest stewardship. To present the 2025 Outstanding Tree Farm of the Year Award, please welcome Commissioner Amanda Beal of the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very honored to be here today to present an award that highlights the value of forest stewardship and the Maine Tree Farm Program. I also want to thank Maine Woodland Owners for providing space on their agenda for this award to be presented today, and to congratulate them on their 50th anniversary, which is indeed a milestone to be celebrated. The Maine Tree Farm Program and the outstanding tree farmers that we celebrate each year represent Maine's 92% forest ownership status in the most impactful way. It is with great pleasure that DACF and the Maine Forest Service within our department remain active supporters of the Maine Tree Farm Program. In fact, Maine Forest Service Director Patty Cormier asked that I convey her regrets for not being able to be here today. And she asked me to pass along that she was very excited to hear of the awardees and looks forward to attending the field day later this year. And I also look forward to attending the field day if my calendar permits me to. With that said, it is my distinct pleasure to recognize Jay and Catherine Libby of Cornville as the 2025 Maine Outstanding Tree Farmer of the Year. Jay and Catherine have owned their 120-acre property for 42 years. In their application, in answer to the question of what the primary objective of their tree farm is, the response read, "The enrichment of owning and caring for this property and involving our children and grandchildren to carry on our love of it." Their woodlot has truly been an all-family effort. Their children and grandchildren are involved in the sugaring process, firewood process, and recreating on the property. And I think we all know how important it is that this intergenerational engagement happens in order to build the stewards of our forests for the future. The family themselves do all of the work, such as thinning, logging, yarding, transportation to the mills, and processing firewood for their customers, as well as building and maintaining their own roads. The Libbys also process 200 gallons of delicious maple syrup annually and sustainably harvest about 75 to 80 cords of forest products each year. The Libbys also put in effort to share their beloved woods and all that they provide. Their biggest public event has been the annual Maine Maple Producers Association's Maine Maple Weekend, and they are always willing to be part of the USDA and Maine Woodland Owner events. They have hosted children and adult groups at their sugar house, have assisted with talks at the Somerset Extension Office explaining sugar making, and have worked with multiple organizations such as the Tree Farm, Maine Forest Service, Maine Woodland Owners, Maine Maple Producers, Northeast Logger Association, and the Certified Logging Professionals Program. Their application also stated, quote, besides all the advice they have followed from foresters, USDA, Maine Woodland Owners, and other tree farmers, they have proven for over 30 years their concern, dedication, and love that woodland ownership requires. That love and care for their land is truly inspiring, especially for someone who is also a small woodland owner, and I'm sure this resonates with everyone in the room. And so I ask that you all please join me in thanking and celebrating Jay and Catherine, along with their family and their foresters, Darren Turner and John Doty, as the 2025 Maine Outstanding Tree Farmers of the Year.
Oh,
Thank you.
yeah, I will. If I can get a hold of myself.
Yeah, let me hold it.
First thing I'd like to say is I'm proud to be a member of that outfit right there. I'm sorry, but this stuff means a lot to me. My family, it draws them into my house. It draws them to our property. It allows us to be together, except for, some people just get together on Christmas and New Year's and, Thanksgiving. I get those guys there all the time. Sometimes they come to work, sometimes they come to play. Our middle son, he doesn't come to work very often because he's a doctor, but he is there as a supporter. And, but this award, I didn't earn. There's a reason right there. This woman, she has stood by. Why, look at Uncle Henry's and buy tractors, look for woodlots, and spend time on the woodlands. She does everything for me. My kids, they're the biggest part of it. The other thing I really wanted to mention was in about 1980, I think, the state of Maine hired a forester. I got to meet him about 84. Bob Lessor was my first forester on that property. He came 5 straight years and visited with me and told me what to do. I'm thinking, this can't be right. You got to cut trees to make them grow. But Bob, I know you're up there. This guy was the inspiration for all the things we've got. And we really appreciate everything, you guys. This Maine Woodlands, I love them. The tree farm sign on our front porch is one of my favorite signs. I'm proud of it. So I encourage all you guys to do what we've done. I mean, I've spent way too much money. I probably, you talk about revenue stream. Probably if I hadn't worked for Sappy for 41 years, we probably wouldn't have met the bills, but we're doing okay now. I appreciate everything you've done for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, that's a hard act to follow right there. So if you're a landowner, you understand everything he just talked about. So I appreciate that as a third generation landowner myself. I'm Tom Doak. I'm Executive Director of Maine Woodland Owners, and it is my distinction and honor to introduce Senate President Mattie Daughtry, who is here to talk with a legislative sentiment on our 50th anniversary. President Daughtry is a lifelong resident of Brunswick, graduated from Brunswick High School and Smith College. She co-owns and brews Moderation Brewing Company. So if you like beer, that's a good thing, folks here. She served 4 terms in the House of Representatives, and she had just begun her 3rd term in the Maine Senate and her 1st term as Senate President. So, Madam President, you're welcome here.
Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here and to honor this organization. And real quick, I just want to say, I know the work that you all do is so crucial, not only because we are the most forested state, but also from the economic impact of what you all do. While I don't maintain a woodlot myself, my grandfather, my mother grew up in Eastern North Carolina, and he did. And my mom grew up with stories, grew up experiencing this, and I heard the stories of him actually logging and harvesting with percherons. So for me, a lot of the stories and sort of pictures around our house were from folks in my family out there working these woodlots with these amazing, majestic animals. And that's sort of part of a root of my sort of identity that I grew up with as well. So I know from their stories how hard the work is and how crucial it is. So thank you for everything that you do. And with that, I am here to read an official sentiment from the Maine State Legislature. Be it known to all that we, the members of the Senate and House of Representatives, join in recognizing Maine Woodland Renoster. The people of Maine.
I want to turn now to the simple fact that this is Maine Woodland Owners' 50th year of existence. And that is a measure that is astonishing to some of us but also makes many of us proud because people over those 50 years, it all began with Duncan Howlett gathering some friends of his up here in Augusta, I think in the Civic Center, to form this organization. And this could not have happened. We could not have had the success we've had without contributions of members from over those decades in many different ways. There are some milestones that we ought to, if I could have them on the screen here. Oop. I can't quite read that big screen. What we want to do is we want to take a little history trip. We want to show you and remind you of some of the past presidents, the current and past board members. We want to recognize those of you who were here, and we also want to recognize longevity. So the key of, here we go. Got it. I know how to push a down arrow once I see the arrow. So in 1975, the Small Woodland Owners Association of Maine was founded by a small group of woodland owners led by Duncan Howlett of Lovell. And he gathered some friends together here and we were underway. In 1976, 1 year later, the first edition of the Swarm newsletter was published. In 1981, the first year of a monthly newsletter. In 1987, the first staff were hired, The executive director was Abbott Ladd, and the office assistant was Debbie Ladd, who's still here. The longest memory, the longest service to this organization is from Debbie Ladd, for which we are very grateful. In 1991, the Patty Eastman Carroll Memorial Forest in Sweden became the first parcel of land donated to SWOM, creating its land trust. In 1993, the Legislative Committee organized to focus on ensuring woodland owners are represented in the Maine legislature, and that began our legislative activity. Peter Lawrence led SWOM's first major legislative initiative, which was timber trespass, and some of you may know more about that than I do. In 2011, the newsletter became a full color newsletter. And I have to say, of all the benefits that we provide to our members, that newsletter always ranks near the, well, at the top of the list. In 2012, the first deputy executive director was hired, Bill Williams. In 2016, SWOM changed its name to Maine Woodland Owners, and the newsletter got expanded to 20 pages. And I can tell you that takes a lot of work to get out as often as we do. In 2019, we moved the office to the current location at 8 Milliken Court in Augusta. And in 2020, the Land Trust could proudly boast that we have conserved now 10,000 acres of working forest land. Well, if we can, yeah, I'm not going to go through all of these people, but these are the past presidents of the Maine Woodland Owners, and you can see many of you will remember many of these names. And but each of them in his or her own way have contributed significantly to the development and the growth of this organization. The executive directors, Abbott Ladd, James Waite, Judy Berg, Jeff Romano, and Tom Doak, there's a question mark there, have led this organization extraordinarily well. And now, I'm going to move to the plans for this year. Because it's our 50th anniversary, we are determined to take a giant leap forward. We've decided that this organization has come a long way. We've got a substantial land trust that is spread across the state of Maine. We have a budget of just under $1 million. And the land trust is growing. So we have so many people who've been willing to step and help out on specific projects. But with a budget of just under $1 million, we have a 5-figure endowment. And an endowment is the way to guarantee the future success of this organization. And what better time to undertake that than the 50th year of the organization? So we are going to mount a capital campaign, and that campaign goal is, we're planned to start and finish it this year. The campaign goal will be $500,000. We expect the board will be able to raise from its own members 20% of that goal. And that seems like a lot, except that one generous donor has already stepped up to pledge half of that $100,000. And we are frankly very excited about this. This is an achievement we are confident we can reach, and we'll be out asking for people to do what we can. I think that the milestone, the milestones that there's some people I want to recognize, and I skipped over this bit, but I did want to ask all current and present and past board members, if you would stand up. We would like to see how many of you are at least here in this room. One by one. Good, good, good. That's a good crowd. Thank you very much. And I think Tom's the only executive director who's here. the past, he's not passed. And let's see, I think that's it. I think that's really what we have to do. Other, oh, yes. How long, thank you, Jen. Members of the organization, how long, how many of you have been members of this organization for, I'm going to go from 10 years to 50 years, okay? From 10 years, how many have been members for 10 years? Can you stand up or raise your hands, raise your hands. We'll see that. Good, good, good. How many for 20 years? Okay. Now we're going to make it harder. You got to stand up. How many for 30 years? Very good. Very good. And keep standing. How many for 40 years? And has anyone here been a member for 50 years, the whole time? Thank you. Okay. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to Tom.
Thank you, Tom. I wanted to talk a little bit about upcoming plans. We've got a busy year coming ahead, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Because it is our 50th year, we're planning to have at least 50 individual events throughout the year through our chapters and through some other bigger events. So you'll see a whole bunch of different things coming forward. We're working on, we have such a rich history of our newsletters, and we have multiple binders of the newsletter. So we're going to pick 50 of the best of the newsletter over the last 50 years and make those available. So you'll see a compendium of what we think are the best. And there's a lot of really good kind of interesting articles that you'll see. And we're likely to have in the summer a very significant individual event out in the woods to celebrate our 50th anniversary. So watch our newsletter for a whole bunch of new ideas and recognition of this 50th anniversary. I think I should also talk about a couple of, in the upcoming year, what I expect to see in the legislature. It's a new legislature, a lot of new members. We have put in 2 legislative initiatives this year. One deals with municipal ordinances. This bill has passed in each of the last 2 legislative sessions and has never been allowed to come up for a vote in the Senate. So this is an interesting one, but there are a lot of local ordinances in place. But under statute, you have to adopt the local ordinance, you must follow a certain procedure. And most local ordinances that regulate forestry did not follow the statute. So there's a whole bunch of forestry ordinances in place in towns that are not legally adopted. So we have proposed that there be a deadline to bring those up to the standard that was required in the law, or they will disappear. We've had good success at the committee level, but we've not been able to get it to a vote. I'm pretty sure we'll be able to do that this year. So that's one of them. And the other one is an interesting one that some of you may be dealing with. I know on our lands, we don't allow game cameras and tree stands to be placed on our lands. We don't want to deal with the issues and those kind of things. All the lands are open hunting, but we don't allow tree stands and game cameras. And I think this year we found 8 tree stands or game cameras on us. And those are just the ones we found. So the question always comes up, if you find one on, under Maine law, you have to have permission of a landowner to put up a game camera or a tree stand, and it has to be labeled. We haven't found one yet that's labeled, and we haven't given permission. But the question always comes out, well, what can you do as a landowner? Most landowners, I think, would simply remove them. But the question is, well, can you keep them and those kind of things? So we want to clarify the law that says, if you find one on your land that's not legally there, it becomes abandoned property under Maine law, and it can be disposed of in any way you choose. It also will help law enforcement, because if a game warden comes to help you and takes the tree stand down for you, they have under their provisions, they have to keep keep it in a safe place and make sure nothing happens to it and see if they can find who it is. I've never had anybody call up and say, where's my tree stand? And maybe, I'm guessing none of you have probably either, but in this case, once it becomes abandoned, it now becomes your possession. You can say to a game warden, you take it down. The game warden doesn't have to have any care for it. They can dispose of it. They can give it away. They can destroy it. And so I think that, and that's something we've been working with the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Department. And I'm pretty sure we'll be able to get that one through. The board also asked me to talk a little bit about my own personal plans. I do want to thank the members of this organization. I've been here 20 plus years in this job. It's a fantastic group. As a third generation landowner, I can relate to everybody's story that is here. And it's a great organization, and I've had a great time meeting a lot of people. Sorry, I didn't think it was going to happen like this. So I have told the board I plan to retire in January of 2026. Something I've been thinking about for a long time. I think it's the right time for this organization and for me. Sorry, I didn't think it would be like this. But some of you know that with our deputy executive director, as Color Black recently stepped down from her job, and I suggested to the board this would be a good time, instead of replacing her, that you feel that they work to find my successor, because I think that's the best way we're going to get a good next good executive director. So one thing that's really important to me, as before I leave this organization, I want to make sure it's in good hands and on sound fitting. So specifically are staying this year, our 50th year, so I can help raise the funds that we need for this organization and help my successor in any way I can. I know there are going to be some people that'll be happy that I'm leaving. I know already. Particularly those, I have to tell you this story, particularly those that have tried so desperately to pass Sunday hunting over the last 21 years that I've been in this job. Because I am known as the person that is blocking that, and I am the Darth Vader, frankly, of Sunday hunting to these folks. But I've had a great deal of fun sometimes with this issue, because if you saw what I saw in some of the efforts that have been made, it's almost comical and entertaining, the gyrations that go on. I went back and looked at my records, and while I have been executive director, we have blocked 23 separate Sunday hunting bills. And I will tell you, I will be disappointed in this next year if I don't have to do it again, because it's a lot of fun. The good news is all signs are that there will be at least one Sunday hunting bill in the upcoming legislature. So I'll have one more good shot at it. So after this meeting, you'll see an announcement about recruitment for my position, and it'll be a chance for me to tag team. I expect there'll be a replacement probably hired sometime in the spring, but I'll be here the full year and work with that person over the next year, so that we have a really good transition. We don't miss a beat as we go forward. And so I'm looking forward to another really fine year with this organization. And thank you for the opportunity to be the executive director.
That it usually is. Tom Doak is a class act, and we have been very, very much benefited by all of us personally, and as an organization, we have been helped enormously by his work, sometimes in the field. I remember the first time he came to our property in Sebago, and he could tell me things about the property that I didn't know at all. I've learned an enormous amount from him, as have all of you. And he's been, I think, the model executive director for an organization like this, because he understands how to manage people and he understands the subject matter, which is both what's going on in Maine's forests and also what's going on in Maine's legislature. And so when I have been with Tom at legislative hearings, I've watched him be very clear, very polite, very conscientious in the way he presents himself and this organization. And I admire the way he's conducted himself. Our board meetings are driven by the issues that he brings up and wants to have a fuller discussion among people. He doesn't come in saying that, we have to do X, we have to do Y. He comes in saying, here are the things that we're faced with, and here are some suggestions I have. Here's how I think we ought to go. What do you think? And he listens. And I just find that, my experience with Tom and with this organization has been a very important part of my life. And I think that Tom has been a long-term advocate for for healthy Maine forests and for healthy Maine people who own them. We will miss him, but I think it's worth noting how unusual it is for someone to have the capacity to not just leave an organization and say, I wish you well, but to be there day to day over the course of a year, helping his successor to learn the ropes and learn what Tom knows about how to work the legislature, how to work the forest, and how to work an organization of diverse people. So we will have more to say about Tom at a later time this year. But I just want to express my thanks to him for all he's done for this organization, for all of you, and for the woodlands of Maine. And with that, my next instruction is what? Are we moving on to? Good.
So we are down one screen, and we're moving that screen a little bit so everybody can see. Our presenters are going to be using their slideshows for the day. So I apologize ahead of time, and maybe we'll do a little bit more adjusting so everybody can see that screen better, but that will be the screen we're working with today. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of update on our presentation and our AV. So on that, I'm going to hand it over to Tom.
Well, now that I've recovered from all that trauma here, I want to introduce Ben Carlisle, President Carlisle. I had the opportunity a couple of weeks ago. Ben had asked me to come talk to his staff about what I see and know about woodland owners and their thing and how to interact with woodland owners and the things they care about. And so I said, one of the things I said, well, great, I'll be happy to do that, but I've got a favor to ask of you. And that is come to our annual meeting and talk about from the big picture, what he sees as the future of woodland ownership and the forest industry and kind of the big picture things. And so this is I guess he's paying me back by coming here today. But Ben is, if you're not familiar, President Carlisle is a forest management and timber resources company headquartered in Bangor. They operate in several states and in Canada, I think, right, Ben? Yeah. He's a native of Bangor. He's actually the fourth generation of family members involved in the company. He served on the board of directors since 2003, vice president in 2010, and became president in 2013. He also serves on the board of directors of the Katahdin Bank Shares as president of the Forest Products Council, on the boards of the Forest Society of Maine, North Maine Woods, and Maine Forest and Logging Museum. Graduate from Hamilton College and holds an MBA from Orland Graduate School in Business at Babson College. So I'm very pleased to invite and that we have Ben here. And Ben, come on up and thank you for coming.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Okay, yeah. And then can I use that clicker too? Wonderful. Okay. Thank you all. I'm very honored. It's a great group of folks, and on this occasion, I'm particularly honored on the 50th anniversary I think you're set up well for the future. You guys talked about the financials earlier. This organization's excellent at serving its members and making outreach. I think you're very well set up. And speaking of future, Tom asked me to speak today on the future of land management. And my first thought was, how far out do you want me to go? Because forestry by its very nature is a very long-term. You have to have your eyes out on the horizon, not right in front of you. And so with the caveat that I'm not a futurist, I would call myself more of a pragmatist, and some people would call me a traditionalist. I do spend a lot of time thinking about where my company stands and where the industry is headed in the future, and I'm pleased to share my thoughts today. Just a little bit of context about my company. Tom mentioned it before, but my company was founded in 1924, and if you do that math, that's 100 years. We actually just hit our 100th anniversary last March, and it was formed by two people, Henry Prentiss and my great-grandfather, George T. Carlisle. That's a picture of him right there with his dog and his axe. Our clients include investors, families, woodlot owners, municipalities, land trusts, pretty much anybody that owns land. We are family owned, as Tom mentioned. We're family owned and managed entirely by my family. We've got 70 employees. We're very fortunate to have an excellent team. We've got a couple of them here today that'll be milling around. I think they're over that way. And some of them have the opportunity to work on the land trust lands. We have offices in Maine and New York and in Canada, as Tom mentioned. We are also certified by both the Forest Stewardship Council and the Sustainable Forestry Initiative on most of the lands that we manage, as well as a chain of custody certificate that allows us to make claims to the marketplace about our wood. We are vertically integrated, and I think that's one of the reasons that makes that's led to our success. I like to say if it has to do with owning trees, we do it. This is a list of some of the things that we do. One thing that's not on that list that was on this list, I had to trim this. We recently were in manufacturing. We were manufacturing utility poles and doing some woodyard operations, and we've recently sold that, so we're no longer doing manufacturing. At one point, we had a sawmill. We found out we were sawing money instead of wood, and so we got out of that business. But we also have a significant investment of ourselves in forest land ourselves. We own about 140,000 acres, all in Maine. And we have our own harvesting capacity as well. We have 4 crews of tree length operations and 3 crews of cut to length operations, representing over $20 million invested. So I thought it would be good to give a little context about why our clients own land. And traditionally, the investment rationale is for financial return, 3 to 5% cash on cash return. Lately, it's been more like 3% based on marketplace. But the big reason also is value appreciation that you don't realize until you sell, but the value rises over time. So you look at the stock market and you look at 3 to 5% return and you say, well, why would anyone buy land? And the new investment rationale has to do more with stability, capital preservation, a connection to the land, a legacy. We heard the Libby's talking about their family and owning land as a legacy. It's a good hedge against inflation, and there are alternative uses that landowners are capitalizing on as well. And importantly, one of the big benefits of owning land is you can throttle it. You can cut more timber when you need to, and when you're not cutting it, it's growing on the stump. And you don't get that with a lot of other assets. So with that perspective, when I was preparing for this presentation, you've met him already, my great-grandfather, and I thought to myself, what would he say if you were to ask him 100 years ago what the future holds for Maine woodlands? And it was actually quite humorous, because I think that he would say things like, the world is always going to need more paper, the future is in white pine, Great Northern is a rock, Mechanization is a fad, and I'll always carry my axe. And there's no need for all these expensive roads when you have rivers that transport your timber, and railway is the future. Because in 1924, rail, of course, was in the heyday, and in fact, Maine had some rail up in northern Maine transporting timber at that time. So, with that being said, I ask that you take what I say today with a grain of salt. My perspective is based on the current situation. And in fact, I think you probably ought to take that grain of salt and throw it out because and replace it with a giant block of salt. This is the crystal ball that I used to make this presentation. As you can tell, it's pretty cloudy. So this presentation is going to be pretty light on predictions. I'm not going to make many. And those that I do are going to be pretty speculative. Whoop. So I took the perspective of using what I call different lenses when I look at the future. And those lenses, I used 5 different lenses. The lens of timber markets, the lens of climate, technology, society and policy, and land ownership. So, starting with the first. Maine is incredibly fortunate to have a diverse set of markets, and I think it's part because we have a diverse forest. And although interest rates have taken the steam out of a lot of our lumber markets and things like that, we still have a massive shortage of homes. And so there are supportive elements in our marketplace. But I think we're at a pretty big inflection point right now. We're dealing with lower margins at our markets and a more competitive landscape than we've ever seen. And I just took a moment, and I know I missed some markets on this list, and those of you, I apologize over there that can't see this, but I put a list of some of the markets that we sell our wood into today, timber markets that we sell our wood into today. And of course, they're dominated by pulp and paper and sawn products like lumber. But we also make wood pellets, telephone poles, golf tees, railroad ties, biochar, oils and resins, power and heat, chips and shavings. There's a ton of products that come out of the Maine woods, and we sell to all of these today. But the markets of tomorrow are not going to look like the markets of today. We're seeing a lot more attention to renewable resource management and those renewable materials, things that can replace fossil fuels, and a substitution for energy-intensive products like concrete and steel and plastics. And wood has a role in that, I believe. We're on the cusp, I think. I think we're seeing the very first wave of this stuff. The insulation plant in Madison is a big example of that, using wood fiber as insulation. But we also have things that have been talked about recently, like biofuels. It's a less carbon-intensive alternative to fossil fuels. And those are on the bleeding edge, but they're getting better, and we're getting more efficient at making them. There's also nanocellulose, which you may or may not have heard of, but there's a wide array of applications, primarily to make things stronger materials using wood fiber. And there's also things that are called mass timber, like CLT panels that you may have heard of, or structural round timber, new ways of manufacturing and new uses for wood. So we're on the cusp of all this, I believe. You'll notice that 2 of those, well, I don't know if you noticed, but the 2 of those products, the biofuels and the nanocellulose, use low-quality wood. And low-quality wood is very important. The use of low-quality wood is very important for Maine, for woodland owners and for marketplace, because it helps you weed the garden. The forest is a garden. The crops take a long time to grow. But the forest is a garden and it needs weeding. And having low quality markets is incredibly important to getting that done. So the second lens I chose to use was climate. The forest is changing. And it's going to take a long time, and it's going to take us generations to notice the change in forest composition. And I use the word notice in quotes there because we're already seeing the effects. The forest won't just die, but it will adapt. And the forest will have an effect of moving sort of northward. You'll start to see fewer and fewer needle trees and more of the oaks. And that'll happen over a long time. Harvesting techniques are also going to have to adapt. We're seeing the effects of climate change in warmer weather and wetter weather during mud season for longer. And that's changing very rapidly. We have one of our foresters retired recently after 51 years, and he had stories about working in cold winters in November, and we just don't see that anymore. So our harvesting techniques, in order to access wetter areas, are going to have to change. So we're already seeing difficulty accessing in soils that are poorly drained. We don't have good ways to get them. Equipment manufacturers are looking at ways to adapt. But we are seeing also, and I think this trend will continue, more reliance on equipment that has a lighter impact on the ground and that has a higher degree of flotation so that those areas can be accessed. The other thing that I talked about timber markets, but the other thing you have to keep in mind that climate, I think, is driving is interest in climate-based forest products. You've heard a lot of, I know there's some comments later today about carbon, and I'm sure you've heard a lot about it. But have you heard of clean water credits? Have you kind of heard of clean air credits? I don't know how those things are going to work. I don't know whether or not somebody will find a way to monetize those values, but I think that those forest products will play a role. And I think the other thing that is very important is that a healthy forest is also climate resilient. And I think that's well established. The other thing that landowners should expect with a changing climate is higher costs to put in roads. These are photographs from the storm last winter of property of ours that were washed out. And you're just going to see more investment, the need for more investment in water crossings, in roads that can withstand high rain events. And we're seeing these have been replaced. The culverts there that you see has been replaced by a bridge, and that road's been repaired. But it's causing more costs, and we're seeing that today. The third lens that I chose to look at the future is in technology. And a couple of highlights here. Equipment automation. I think there will be more equipment that gets remotely controlled. I think we're in the very bleeding edge stages of that. The one problem that I think will keep people in seats is that AI and machines don't grease equipment. They don't repair, they don't change chains. And so you still need somebody on site in order to do it. So it's not going to fully replace the need for somebody present on site. There's also the consideration of safety. Sorry, I'd advanced it here, but not here. There's also the issue of safety working when you're working remotely. What you see here is a photograph of a person that's operating a skidder remotely. This technology is being piloted now, and they're using an Xbox controller. It's insane. The one thing that I do think is the most compelling equipment automation opportunity that I've seen is what's called tandem trucking, where you have one truck that's being driven by a person and a truck following it that's automated. And that has, of course, the benefit of for one person being able to haul more timber and not violating the road weight standards. So that's something that's being piloted also. I think it's the most compelling automation for equipment that I've seen. There's also remote sensing and monitoring through things like drones. And the imagery from those things is getting a lot better. And AI models are being developed in order to interpret that information. The one downside to that is that everybody knows where everything is. And I'm not sure that's a good thing if you're a woodland owner. Everybody, because I think that information can be misused in things like regulation and policy. But I do think that even though we're getting better at remote sensing and monitoring, I don't think it replaces the forester. There's still a lot of judgment calls that will need to be made. In fact, I heard a story just recently of one of our foresters was telling me this yesterday, where somebody flew a drone over the property and said it had 30 cords to the acre, and they showed up and it had something a lot less. And so the tools are getting better, though. And then as a case in point, this picture here is a map of the state of Maine that is actually hanging on a wall of ours in an office. And somebody took the time to actually mount this and mat it and frame it and hang it up. And what's interesting here, and you can't quite read it, I didn't expect this to be so small, but this was a composite image that was taken from 3 different orbits of a satellite in 1972 on the dates of 1st of September, 18th of September, 20th September. Took 3 orbits of a satellite to take this photo in several different spectral bands. I noticed that it also says that, well, I'm going to skip that part. So anyway, took a lot of work to put this together, and somebody mounted it and framed it, and it's now hanging in my office. Well, this was done with my phone. That I downloaded on my phone, and it's an image of a forest in New Zealand. So the technology here is still evolving quite a bit and becoming easier. And think about how enabling that is. So the 4th lens is on land ownership. We've gone through some substantial changes over the years since statehood. The first iteration I call lumber barons. And post-settlement, sort of the folks that are in it to make lumber and ship it. And through the 90s, through the 1900s and the 1980s, you had the paper barons, a lot of paper companies owning land. I'm using the word barons a lot. 1980s till now, you have people interested in solely generating investment returns. So the investment folks came in, the TIMOs owning land. And from the 2010s to now, and I think it represents a new phase in ownership, you have conservation interests. And just as a case in point, you're not going to see all the nuances of this, but this is 2 maps of the state of Maine. The red is industrial ownership, like paper companies. And you can see the change in the 2 maps, red to blue there. And embarrassingly, I had to take out a calculator because I didn't believe it when I first thought, but that's only 11 years in change in ownership. Substantial changes, and I think it's going to change again in the future. I also think that fragmentation will continue. We think about fragmentation as people carving out and selling their land to different owners. I think that is in general is a process that happens more and more frequently. That's going to complicate forest management. Forest management needs scale in order to operate efficiently. And so that's going to complicate forest management, but I think it's also going to complicate policymaking because it's easier to do regulation over large areas of land, and it's harder to do it when you introduce more stakeholders into that process. And so fragmentation, just by its very nature, introduces new stakeholders into the conversation. The other thing is what I call pseudo-fragmentation. It's not really drawing lines on the ground and you get this piece and I get this piece. It's more about landowners of today, and I think in the future, are selling off rights to their land through either easements, again, carbon conservation easements, water easements. I read about somebody selling underground carbon storage easements in Washington State the other day. But that's a fragmentation of its own kind. because it introduces new stakeholders to the conversation. Even though it's one physical property of land with one boundary, you got multiple people that own it. Land values, I think, as I mentioned in the earlier segment, the land values over time rise. I think they will rise continually as the market adapts to some of these changes. We're at a point now where I think we're at a peak, and we'll see some retreating in those land prices in the short term, but long term, I think the appreciation will rule. I think land trusts and conservation groups are going to play a bigger role in our forest. At a lot of time, conservation is compatible with timber harvesting, and I think that's one thing that I've appreciated. What Tom and the board has done at Maine Woodland Owners is making sure that you know that you're going to have a productive forest. And in fact, I think conservation and timber harvesting is actually critical for conservation in order to fully reap some of the socioeconomic benefits that all of the benefits that conservation claims to do, but Maine's rural economy is incredibly important. And in order to reap the socioeconomic benefits, you need to support the markets. And I think that forest management is key to that. Forest management gives you healthy forests, which gives you healthy markets, which is supportive of the Maine's economy and Maine's conservation initiatives. I use this lens of society and policy, and I just wanted to take sort of a step back and take a sort of a macro look at things. The long-term demographics for lumber are very positive. People are going to need houses. We've chronically underbuilt in the United States. We're 4 million houses short over the last decade, and people are going to need houses. So long-term, and houses is where lumber gets used. So long-term, I think the demographics of the population and the need for housing is going to be favorable for lumber. We have had a period of high interest rates, which have affected mortgage rates, which has affected home affordability. So we don't see as much turnover these days, but I think, again, long-term, declining interest rates are going to help. As I mentioned in the markets discussion, we're seeing sort of macro level, we're seeing a very strong movement towards reusable, renewable materials and energy reliance, and I think that's going to serve us positively. There were folks, when a lot of the conservation groups were forming and starting to buy up large parcels, there were a lot of folks that viewed that as a threat. Again, I think if you have that symbiosis between timber harvesting, conservation, healthy forest, I think it's really not the threat that a lot of people once thought it was going to be. It's just a different kind of owner with different objectives. But that said, there are headwinds. There are headwinds sort of at the macro level. There are rising costs that are really affecting industry margins. That chart right there is actually Prentiss and Carlisle's logging costs. It's our actual data over the course from 2018 till now, and you'll see that it's 55.9% above where it was in just a few years ago. We're also seeing incredible pressure in workforce. People are leaving the logging industry. That's a threat. They're finding more comfort in other industries. It's a tough business, and so we're striving. We need to find younger people to be able to do the work, and that's becoming harder and harder. There's also sort of a need from society. People talk about societal needs, and that affects regulation. They talk about what it benefits society, and well, that's a really pretty big burden for landowners. It can be. Regulation already is pretty tough, and I think, but there's a sort of a macro focus on what the benefit of society that's really kind of amorphous and not defined, but it influences regulation. And then lastly, I'll struggle not to get into the politics of this, but there's an air of protectionism out there, both in the US and globally. And I think those throwing up artificial walls it's going to hurt the industry. when you talk about international trade. And so that is going to affect what we do. It's going to affect how the forest gets managed. Let me wrap up briefly by talking just a slight anecdote, and we really can't talk about the future without referencing our past. As I said earlier, the trees are a crop. They just take a long time to grow and to tell their story. And our forest today is an imprint and a reflection of what we did yesterday. This is another, I don't know why I'm showing all kinds of artwork from my building, but this is another picture it's hanging in my office. Entering spruce budworm spray area. It's a warning sign that we're all over the Northwoods. Again, somebody took the time to frame it and put it in a frame and hang it on a wall. But our forest today still shows signs of that in its terms of its composition and its age. And you have other anecdotes like that, which the forest, what you did in the past is you're seeing it now. So what I'll say is the forest of the future is going to be dictated now. We're writing that story right now. So what's that story? I told you I was going to be light on predictions, but I do have one. You remember that picture there? I gave him a quote that said there's going to be no need for expensive roads. I do have a prediction to make. We are going to need roads. They're going to be expensive, and we're going to have to live with that fact. So that's all I had. Thank you very much for having me, and I'm welcome any questions, or I don't know if we have time for questions, Tom?
You do have time, so.
Okay. Yes,
Go
sir.
right ahead. We've got time for questions. We're going to run a mic to you when you have a question so everybody can hear, so. No.
All right, thanks for an excellent presentation. That was very good. As machinery and equipment gets more expensive and harder to move and more costly, and land gets more fragmented and jobs get smaller and smaller, what can be done to help people who have small acreage, 50, 100 acres, 150 acres, to be able to afford to have commercial harvesting done without totally destroying their land? Or not destroying the land, but cutting more than they would like to?
Yeah. An excellent question, and very difficult, honestly. The forces in play are complicated. To be able to afford, so first of all, I think what you're going to see is landowners pooling their resources together. It's much more efficient at a large, as I said, as a larger scale. So if you can get your neighbor, you can get your, you can group that together into a larger operation. That's a practical thing that I think can be done now. And we're seeing a little bit more of that. The larger picture around workforce is a very complicated one, and it's going to require, I think, investments in training, getting people schooled up in how to operate this stuff. I do think that remote equipment does have a role. It's going to be a long, long time before we see it. And it's a very difficult question to answer. So I don't really have an answer for you other than those two things.
This is kind of a close. Same question.
It should work.
Status in the future of PNC owning its own logging equipment.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. As I said, we do own our own logging equipment. We started that in the late 50s, I believe. We did it because we couldn't hire the contractor capacity. These days, we're seeing other landowners make the same decision to own their own crews. And I think it's about surge capacity, labor, they control. For my company, it's a strategic advantage for us. We're able to, first of all, we are able to control who's in the seat. So we know their training, we know how good they are. We're able to call them and move them as we need to. So it offers us an advantage. And what I've seen, well, several other landowners of the scale that we're at also investing in equipment. One of them very, very recently. So it is expensive. The capital costs on equipment have gone up, have skyrocketed over the last couple of years since COVID. I remember we're going to order a piece of equipment, but they couldn't get the steel because it was made in Ukraine. So there are forces at work that are global forces are affecting the capital investment required. We just signed up, we just got a processor and it was over $600,000.
I just noticed yesterday there was a bill introduced in the House that would require anybody that gets and I don't know the details yet, anybody that gets a carbon benefit to register with the state. And again, the details I don't know yet, but could you have any thoughts about that?
Yes, I do. Carbon registries, these are public registries. In order to have a carbon offset, it has to be actually publicly registered. So I find that need to be duplicative. You can look up today which carbon credits have been issued anywhere in the state through publicly available registries. So I would say it's unnecessary.
Roughly, do you require for one mechanical outfit to stay
Yep.
afloat economically?
Do you mean continually?
Here, say,
Okay, yeah, the question was, how much acreage do you need in order to keep a single a piece of equipment operating? Is that a crew of equipment operating? A fair amount. I mean, operating continually, it depends on the work they're doing, of course. If they're doing, you can be highly productive in the woods and you can be very picky in the woods. So we look at our production numbers, sort of on a per acre basis, how much we remove, and it's vastly dependent on the stand of trees. That being said, 1,000.
For, oh yeah. It might be better for a later program, but I noticed your grandfather talked about the future includes pine. And so in my part of the state, there's a lot of reliance on white pine. And do you have any thoughts about that? You mentioned generally that needle crops are not likely to fare so well.
Well, my comment there was simply on the importance of the pine markets at the time, and how crucial that product was to the forest at the time. These days, yes, pine is incredibly important. I got to be careful here. Jimmy Robbins is right behind you. Pine is incredibly important in the woods, but it's been replaced in terms of its like a structural element with spruce and fir.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting, the changing footprint over the years, and I was curious. First of all, are those foreign buyers by any chance? And how does Maine forest compare to other parts of the world? Are we attractive to international investors?
Yes. The Maine forest right now, it doesn't have a significant amount of foreign ownership. A lot of the ownership is in funds So investment funds will own it, and we don't have a lot of information about who owns those funds. But I had a conversation recently with a outfit from Germany who, this was probably, well, it was probably 2 years ago. And they were very interested in buying land in Maine, and Canada. And they were interested in land in Maine and Canada, not because it generated a boatload of cash, because it doesn't. But they were worried about their cash invested in banks that was actually had a negative interest rate. So in other words, you pay money to deposit money in banks. And faced with that alternative, land became very attractive to them. So, and I know in other economies located throughout the globe, that's true too. So a lot of people are interested in buying land and holding it simply so they don't lose money.
Let's get a mic.
Ben, as a recent small landowner who's taken advantage of Prentiss and Carlisle's small landowner program very successfully several years ago, my question, I guess, is do you foresee with the changes, do you foresee the opportunity for continuation of the small landowner program that Prentiss and Carlisle manages?
Yeah, it's a good question. Just from my perspective, and when we entered the servicing small landowners, we took the expertise that we'd built in the big woods and realized we could apply that to small landowners. It's a different skill set than what we had built, because it requires a lot of interaction and customization and things like that. But I mentioned earlier fragmentation and how the land is being parcelized a little bit more. And I think for us, we view it as a strategic industry to be part of, and segment of the market. The need is high. There's not a lot of it's not easy to get information about forestry. I mean, that's why this organization exists. It's not, and so we feel that because of those forces, how it's very difficult for landowners to get help, good help, and it's very and the forest is becoming more and more fragmented. It is something we're looking at as an opportunistic. It's growing. It's the segment of our business that's growing.
Do you have any thoughts on insects and invasives and how worried you are about it for both the land you own and that you manage for others?
I do. I would like to sort of maybe I'll make some brief comments, but defer because I think you've got that on your agenda. I think Allison's speaking. I am concerned about this. I had a big picture of the spruce budworm outbreak. I'm concerned about the spruce budworm. Thankfully, we've had some support from the federal government and from the state in order to help fight that. The outbreak is limited to northern Maine, so if you don't know, and I think last time it didn't really make much further south than Bangor. Just because of the composition of the forest and things like that, but I am concerned about spruce budworm. There's also several others that I'm concerned about. Spruce budworm technically is not an invasive; it's a native pest, but it still poses a threat.
I lost my microphone, but I think you'll be around a little bit longer if
Yeah.
somebody has questions.
Yes, I will. Yeah.
This has been fantastic. Thank you, Ben, so much.
You're welcome.
And please thank Ben for his insight here. A couple of things. The governor is coming in about 5 or so minutes, so we're going to do a few door prizes just for a little fun before she gets here. I just want to, while we're figuring that out here, I just want to mention we will have a live auction. Jimmy Robbins, who is a some of you may know him as an extraordinary auctioneer. He's agreed to auction some things off in there in the back of the room. There's an online auction as well that you can log in and bid. I want to mention our staff. You've met Jen over here. Our newest member is Olivia back here. Olivia, you want to raise your hand? Yeah, Olivia, she'll be speaking later, and you met Debbie. The other thing, while we're drawing, I just want to make clear that every once in a while I get people to contact me that are members that are looking for a conservation type buyer. And if you're thinking about, one of the things that we can do is help sometimes put someone who's interested in selling their land would match up with someone who's interested in buying land and keeping it. So if you're thinking about selling your land, I know some people that are interested in buying and keeping the land long-term. So feel free to reach out to me and I can try to work and help connect the two of you. We're gonna do a few door prizes. I'm gonna read the last three digits. And just jump up if you have 051. Fantastic. We'll just give them a choice of two. Any two. All right, the next one is 011. 011. Over here, there we go. Fantastic. This is the really good stuff that we collect all year. Okay, 030. 030. 3. Don't try to, no. 030. No. 092. All right. Got a couple more. 081. 081. How about 041? That's what everybody says when they don't get their number drawn. All right, I shook it up. 102. We're in the 3 digits now. 102. Doug, you don't get anything. 072. 2 board members. This is rigged. 106. 106. I'll draw another. One more. We got one more ticket. I think got time for one more ticket. I'm watching the doorway. 082. Any questions that came up that folks want to bring up now or? Oh, Si, you always do have a question. Yes. Si Balch. Right.
The actions taken by landowners today often don't show up until years later. The forests we have today are the product of previous decades of care by woodland owners like yourselves. The work the Maine Forest Service and the Maine Woodland Owners Association is doing now will determine our forest vitality for future generations. And I'm grateful for the keen observation, the active forest management, proactive treatment, and preparedness for natural disasters that each of you demonstrate every day. So thank you again for your dedication to Maine's woodland, to our environment, to our economy, and congratulations again on 50 years, this remarkable milestone. Together, we will continue the long and proud tradition of forests having a defining role in making Maine the pine tree state, of course. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. So we're a little off schedule, but we're going to adapt just like all woodland owners do. We are going to jump into our forest carbon presentation. We have Max McKenzie from American Forest Foundation with his talking about their program. And then I'll introduce the Renoster folks when it's their turn for their presentation. So Max, come on up.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Matt McKenzie. I am a forester with the American Forest Foundation's Family Forest Carbon Program. Thanks for having me today and talking about my organization, how we can help family forest owners. So, AFF is a nonprofit, mission-driven organization. Focused on partnering with private landowners to unlock the power of America's forests to fight climate change. The AFF is a nonprofit that has partnered with the Nature Conservancy to bring private landowners forestry services in the form of an improved forest management practice. We currently offer two practices in the Northeast: enhance your woodland and grow native forest. So I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with the sign of the tree farms. And if you're familiar with that sign, then you're actually familiar with the American Forest Foundation. We've been administering this program for many years. And off to the side of that sign, you'll see that the FSCP is a partnership between two national and international nonprofits that are passionate about forestry. It's going to be the American Forest Foundation and the Nature. So the majority of U.S. forests today are owned by small family forest owners at 39%. But to be more specific about the state of Maine, approximately 30% of Maine's forests are owned by families. Ownerships of less than 1,000 acres account for 80% of private forests across the country, but has made up less than 1% of carbon projects to date. This is because carbon projects come with very high costs of monitoring, reporting, and verification, along with complex contracts that last hundreds of years or more. A new approach was needed to remove these barriers and allow family landowners to participate in carbon markets. That is what we offer. Family Forest Carbon Program is designed to provide owners of small forested parcels access to carbon markets to help finance conservation. It also helps transition how can we be so confident we are actually sequestering additional carbon? Well, our first of its kind methodology was approved by Verified Carbon Standards in the fall of 2022. It compares the carbon sequestered on land enrolled in a carbon program to a control group of highly similar forests that are not enrolled in the program. By measuring the difference between the forests over time, the methodology isolates the program as the key intervention that created additional carbon benefits. This approach to using real similar forests in real time is called a dynamic baseline, which is constantly updated to account for changing systems, landscapes, policies, and other factors that may change the outcomes of the program's intervention. This is unlike traditional methodologies, which typically set one projected baseline at the beginning of a project based on assumptions rather than reality. This is a great representation of the methodology that I have just spoken about. So, is FFCP a viable and relevant solution? To look at that, we can look at how our program has launched across the nation. So, we started in the Central App and pilots in the Midwest and the Northeast. And then we've had recent expansions through portions of Virginia, Ohio, Tennessee, Kentucky, Alabama, Georgia, and the Carolinas. We have actually redoubled our enrolled acres each year since inception and plan to do so again in 2025. We currently have over 350 landowners enrolled in the program with enrolled properties of over 120,000 acres. We have our set higher. We believe that the Family Forest Carbon Program can provide meaningful climate mitigation by removing 50 million tons of carbon by 2030. That's the equivalent of removing 11 million vehicles from the road each year thereafter. Our ultimate goal is to enroll 20% of family-owned forest acres in the U.S., unlocking family forest owners potential to capture and store 1 billion tons of carbon by 2050. We are an ever-growing impact with some specifics to how we have grown today. We currently have 122,281 acres sold. We paid $30.5 million out to landowners, and we have 90% of highly satisfied landowners within our organization. Now, for the landowners, we focus on three key values. That is funding. We're going to provide incentives to implement specific forest management practices that have been scientifically proven to enhance carbon sequestration. We're going to provide support by connecting enrollees with natural resource professionals to provide technical assistance during site visits, forest management plans, and throughout their contract term. Then we're also going to focus on sustainability to balance multiple benefits of forest management, including timber production, enhancing wildlife habitat, and protecting natural resources. How to enroll. So it is quite an easy process to go through. You're going to get started at our organization's website. That's www.familyforestcarbon.org. From there, you'll find your property on the website map tool, speak with a representative about specifics, connect with FFCP Forester on your property, review your contract and sign, receive your first payment, and then work with the foresters to develop a management plan. Now, I will be available afterwards with sheets explaining how to follow through with the process, and I'd be happy to answer questions about enrolling as well. So the typical term of the agreement is 20 years with our program, and depending on the practice, you'll earn $200 to $300 per acre. Typically, landowners receive 20% of the total upfront in year one and The limited time premium option also allows us to give a 20% increase to the per acre payment. With the climate smart commodities premium option, you'll earn $240 to $360 per acre. One of the innovative approaches built into FSCP is to pay landowners to conduct forest management practices scientifically proven to enhance carbon stock. That means we pay you to conduct practices, not contingent, but upon frequent and extensive carbon storage measurement and verification. So what about timber harvest? One final note about the elephant in the room is that we do allow a degree of timber harvest. Many carbon programs present carbon and timbers as values in opposition to one another. Either you can harvest trees or you can accumulate carbon. This does not have to be true. In fact, carbon programs can help you manage your woods in a way that maximizes the value of your property, including your timber, over the long term. Nearly all of our practices allow a degree of harvesting. Our forest management plans also provide pathways to alter or avoid harvest and generate carbon in the short term, which then leads to both more carbon and timber value in the long term. This not only benefits the landowners enrolled in the program, but also the industry for providing high quality, higher priced timber. Our goal is to help you achieve a healthier, more resilient, and more valuable forest at the end of the 20-year contract, and how to achieve that looks different for every landowner. Take a quick look at our two project options within the Northeast. We have an Antioch Woodland. Now, this does allow a degree of harvesting with rules that are set in place. The sheets that I do have set outside can dig further into what those rules are. But typically, the total harvest conducted under woodland would have to be less than 15% of total basal area, or 25% in any individual stand, plus some following rules. Take a closer look at Grow Older Forest, our second program. This is where you would defer your harvest for 20 years. You are allowed firewood collection and trail maintenance. And it is important to remember that this is not a permanent reserve. Your land will be able to be harvested again once those 20 years are up, if that is your choice. This is just a 20-year program to help sequester carbon and build your environment. Our research indicates that 83% of landowners identified forest health priorities, such as protecting and improving wildlife habitats, protecting nature and biodiversity, and protecting water resources as primary reasons for ownership. Yet less than 20% of landowners have received formal forest management advice, and only about 10% have a written forest management plan. Why? The most common barrier is cost. While landowners want to improve the forest, most cannot afford to do so. Forest management plans can range from hundreds of dollars for a basic plan for a small woodland to thousands of dollars for a more robust or large acreage plan. Our program provides you with direct access to a qualified forester who will work with you to develop an FMP tailored to your goals at no cost to you. Finally, when you enroll in FFCP, we become your long-term partner in forest stewardship. We are fully vested in not only implementing your forest management plan, but also staying connected with you throughout the entire term of our agreement. Our foresters and community engagement specialists offer guidance and support and connect you to the growing community of landowners who have made a commitment to improve their forest health. That being said, thank you so much for your time. My contact information here in case you have any questions.
We'll do Q&A after the next presentation, so I want to bring up the next presenters. We have two presenters from Renoster. We have Mary Ignacio Ignacio. Is a forest economics and policy expert at Renoster. She has held former roles at Native PVC and Manulife and brings deep experience in carbon project development and natural capital management. Her expertise covers climate smart forest products and economic drivers of forest land use. And then Elias Avery is Renoster's co-founder and chief science officer and is a forest remote sensing scientist by training. He's been in the carbon industry for the last 5 years and specializes in combining on-the-ground forest measurement techniques with aerial and satellite data, allowing him to explore forestry at small scale and entire forest at the landscape level. So thank you very much for both of you being here.
I do want to start off by saying thank you for having us. I've been a huge fan of MWO's mission and work as students at courses, but it's very exciting to present to you today what we've been working on for the past several years.
Yeah, likewise, really glad to be here. I'm a member of myself. I've got a small woodlot up in the get the newsletter. It's actually in it.
We're quicker. This is the first carbon program designed for Maine landowners. It is very personal for us. I mean, this photo is something that I took hiking at my in-laws' house, but it's more than that. Even if you are not interested in carbon, we are working to make the state's investments in remote sensing available and accessible and useful for small landowners. So this is our team.
Yes, I mean, this is a quick overview of our team. A lot of us come from Maine. You know, we've got 4 grads from Maine SFR. We've got someone from Bowdoin. This is the only program that's designed specifically for Maine and will just be operating in Maine for a good long time here.
So Ben, during the Prentiss and Carlisle talk, did us a great favor of explaining remote sensing, but it's probably worth quickly defining, you know, when we were talking about remote sensing, we were talking about airborne laser scanning. That's kind of a graphic on the upper left, depicting that. In the middle, you can see some of the data that results from that. And when we combine that with satellite data, or radar and imagery, we can come up with these really cool maps, like what you get on the right-hand side from a humane professor, but it depicts activity across. We can actually understand what is the potential growth on
So yeah, I mean, a little bit of history about our program. We are initially founded as a diligence firm. So what we do is we look into carbon projects and try to investigate whether or not they're really offsetting what they say they're offsetting. We're looking to move into actually creating carbon projects here in Maine. We're looking to create improved forest management projects. The diligence stuff that we've worked on. We're creating an improved forest management project that are generally, 30-year contracts, but maybe a little shorter, a little.
You're way ahead of the curve.
Already.
We agree with Ethan and ASF completely that there are a lot of challenges that are being small landowners. What we're seeing in Maine is that a large portion of the northern of the state is going into large corporate projects where the money is coming in from away and leaving. So that is, not necessarily the best way for the state to benefit from forest carbon. And so one of the big challenges here is affordability. And something that's key to understand about these forest carbon programs is the existing methodologies typically require you to invest an incredible amount of time in on-the-ground inventory. On-the-ground inventory is really important. Cruises are important. Cruise on-the-ground forestry is really important. But if we can do a lot of the measurement and monitoring for forest programs remotely, we can significantly reduce. The other thing that remote sensing allows us to do is quality, and not just remote sensing. I am a forest economist. Obviously, I think it's very important that we get the right around functionality, leakage, and impact for forest and impact millshed. And that is something that our program can use. First methodology that is using forest economics and using remote sensing, really transparent what our project is doing and what the. And finally, compatibility with the forest-based economy. Personally, this is probably what I'm most passionate about. it is very important to me that our forest carbon program and that forest carbon programs in general do not negatively impact our ability to invest in mass timber, nanocellulose, the solutions that Ben was discussing at the top are things I personally worked on in graduate school. So I do think it's really important to our future as a state and as a country that we continue to work towards those, and we want forest carbon to bridge to investing in those and not competing impact. And to that end, I think it's worth noting when it comes to the bill that has just out, should forest carbon programs landowners have to report. As an economist, I can try to use the public registries that are out there already to understand woodshed, millshed, or forest impact from carbon programs, but it's very difficult. The public registries have, it takes a long time to do these big corporate projects, and the information is often quite opaque. And so I actually think that LD 39 could be a huge step forward in our ability to really understand the impact of forest carbon and to balance those with productive timber.
Yeah, I think if we've looked around the country, we've seen a couple of instances where forest carbon programs have taken huge portions of local timber markets out of the supply chain and had real hard shocks in the economy. And so that's why we do support the bill, if we don't want that to happen here. Yeah, I think another note is that, we're setting up a pilot program here in Maine. What we're trying to do right now is recruit interest landowners and basically create a critical mass of buyers and sellers.
I mean, maybe you want to hear us all twice, I don't know. So this is what our program does. We'll break it down kind of into 3 discrete phases. The first thing that we're doing is we're interpreting the public domain sensing data. Second is that we're estimating credits for each parcel based on that data. And the graph that I have here shows the growth curve and the volume curve that we generate for plots. Just an example. But with remote sensing, we can say this, similar to AFS dynamic base mapping. This is where most people are harvesting. And with carbon credits, this is how the economics changes so that it makes sense later. Higher volume. Moving, ideally, our program is helping landowners who want to manage more long-term, bigger trees, maybe lighter harvest, but bigger, more valuable trees. Maybe folks who have historically harvested for pulpwood, but maybe the pulpwood market is there. And so that's what the graph is really showing. And we have worked very hard. We are the most rigorous and conservative methodology. We do penalize ourselves and our methodology quite a bit. But the trade-off there is that that's what really high quality is. We're hoping to get really high credit. And so that third step is negotiating credit skills. Just a note, we are currently working with interested landowners to sign memorandums of a non-binding agreement. And once we finalize the other end, the buyer end, those agreements, then we will. So that's where we are.
Because we're looking for ways to make sure that we have a place for these credits to go. We don't want a situation where it's for summer.
It's, we don't need to spend a ton of time here, but it's worth noting that we can't have a great carbon program. We have wonderful partners. We're the first company that is doing insured credits for buyers. It does not mean that the credits are insured on your end, but it does mean that you can get a higher dollar per credit. That's why that's important. Second thing is we're working with a new registry called Open Forest Protocol. And when we say registry, those are the folks who control their project documentation. They say, yes, you're doing what you say you're doing, and they're the ones who actually issue. And then research, we still work pretty closely with our former professors at the University of Maine so that we can make sure that we are using the absolute best. Oh, and I think I'm going to go drive.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, as a couple other points, I think we're aiming at a price point of about $15 to $25 per acre per year. I mean, which it's not a huge amount, but it can add up. Harvesting is permitted under our program, provided that you work with us and that we create a forest management plan. Goal, of course, is is to increase your carbon stock over the long term and leave you with more carbon than your neighbors. And so certainly harvesting can get us to that point as long as we plan it out properly. Or in some cases, it might just be harvest deferral for a while. Yeah, I think another point that we want to make about our program that we think that we're quite proud of is that we're really trying to get as much of the revenue into small landowners' hands as possible. So we're aiming for a 65% revenue share, which I think is higher than anyone else in the market. Other portions go to the various groups that are ensuring or verifying or checking our numbers, and then of course to us as well. But I don't think that you'll find anyone, sharing the portion of revenue that anywhere near as high as that. And then that is kind of what's enabling us to kind of hopefully deliver that $15 to $25 per acre per year. So one of the cool things that we've developed here is a platform that people can use to look for.
You want to go find your woodlot? Because I don't think I can find your woodlot.
I can zoom into any of them. I think it's okay. Okay. We can develop a platform that people can use to kind of look at their woodlots. And what we've done is we've used the state's LiDAR data and some data from the University of Maine and some of the data that we've developed to kind of plot out some inventories inside of most of the parcels in the state. And so I think, Mary, you have to go to the landowner section there. And so you can go to the website and you can basically find your parcel if it flows here. And once you find your parcel, we'll give you basic statistics that we can derive from the LiDAR. We'll tell you how many quarts that we think you have. We'll tell you your volume. We can give you your diameter distribution. And then of course we can tell you a bit about the carbon program itself. So yeah, here we go. So this is some of the data that I think some of the larger landowners in the state have been able to use to create their forest management plans and inventories. If you think of it as a large landowner state, they've been using LiDAR for a long time. It is flown for the entire state. And so I think, it's one of the exciting things is that we can kind of start to let this filter into small landowners and let them kind of take a look at their land. We'll give you kind of diameter distributions. We're working on creating stumpage estimates, which is a tricky thing to do, but we're hoping in the next couple of weeks we can kind of upload estimates of what we think your current stumpage is and what your stumpage will be at the end of the program. And we're hoping that this can be kind of a general tool that people can use to kind of understand their properties a bit. Although live demo, but yeah, I mean, we have a booth downstairs, so I'm sure that it will work in the booth. And if you want to take a look at the property, we can pull up the property and tell you how many cords you have, and you can tell us what. Quite often, what happens in everything about this.
I mean, to Ben's story, Ben told a story about cords being estimated at one thing and then on the ground being another thing, and that is a tricky thing to get right. But we have been working very hard at. And so note, remote sensing platforms, but obviously, like we said, remote sensing is never a replacement for a boots-on-the-ground forester. But we do hope that it is a tool for landowners and foresters to understand where more forest management planning might be needed, or where it might be beneficial. Another note is that this is a lot of information that we're putting online. It's all public information. However, it's still your information, and so we're putting some safeguards in place. You can only look at 5 parcels from one computer or device, and if you want to do more than that, you do have to give us your email, and we have to verify that you are who you say you are. And all that. But you don't have to do that just to look at one or two devices. The other thing is that you're never going to be able to search for a parcel by name. You could do that with tax records, and that's essentially what we're using here for a lot of our mapping. And so these are all the kind of nuts and bolts that Ben is standing there. So does that mean we need to hurry up? Are we going to? Yeah. Okay. We don't need to go through all of this in detail. We're pretty similar to AFF, except that we do accept softwood. And we also require that the current owner must have a history of commercial harvest. That's important. And we are really hoping to help landowners who do have a financial need to harvest. Participation requirements. We're still working out negotiating with buyers, whether the contract could be 20 years or 30 years. If it's a longer contract, we're going to allow more parties. Let them go. And it is going to be lease type. This is our income. Is this better? Okay. Thank you for saying something. As Eli said, roughly $12 to $25 per acre per year. 10-year offtake agreements. What's important about this is that carbon prices, even though they are volatile, there is a general prices will go up. Kind of like the rest of the economy. It goes like this, but it goes like this in an upward direction. And so if your offtake agreements, I gotta move over here. If your offtake agreements, are shorter than the term of your entire contract, then it means that if prices go up, you might get an opportunity to benefit from it. The other thing is that, again, because of using remote sensing to decrease the cost of creating these projects, we're able to give landowners 65% of the revenue. So, is our program a good fit? Our dashboard actually will tell you whether we think you're eligible or not. And we'll have to confirm that if you're interested in the program. And I do want to note, actually, because we are using state data for your parcels, not all towns in Maine have uploaded their tax map to the internet. And so if you don't see your parcel on our platform, there's a contact us button, and we will work with you to make sure that you get the information for your parcel.
I do want to note that not every forest is the good fit for carbon right now. I think, if you're looking to if you need some sort of like intensive treatment right now, then that's obviously not necessarily conducive with immediately increasing carbon. But likewise, if you're looking to conserve your land and you're already intending on conserving your land, you shouldn't be enrolling in these programs. These programs are designed to take people who are intending to harvest their trees and pay them not to. It's not designed to kind of take people who already have no intention of touching their trees. And this is quite important because it's led to a lot of kind of controversies in the market. Likewise, we don't accept people who are overstocked forests. So we do some calculations with the WIDAR to see whether or not, you've held onto your trees for a very long time, because again, the goal is to kind of take or in existing commercial management that's been maybe harvested maybe too early and too often for a bit of time, and then you kind of push them towards bigger trees. We are very supportive of, lots of other means of conservation finance, but carbon credits can't be used that way, unfortunately. So thank you very much. We'll be right outside. We'll be downstairs. Would love to hear your questions.
Hello. So we're going to do quick Q&A with Mac as well as the Renoster team. And so we'll do, here, you can have this mic back, or you can switch off my, come on up, Mac. And I'll do my sprints around the room. All right, here's our first question.
I don't know if I really need this. Okay, question. Say you evaluate my property as 20%, $20. Is that $20? Do I get 65% of that $20, or is the $20 plus 65?
Yeah. The $20 is after the 65%. So I mean, I think the total would be like what, $30, and then it would be chunked up, and you get your 20.
Okay, and for two questions. One, I already have a Forester. Can I continue to use mine, or would I have to use yours?
Yeah, you can continue working with your third-party forester. We are happy to continue your relation with that forester and work with them as well to make sure that you get the utmost out of all parties involved.
And second and final question, give somebody else a turn. You said you would fund certain projects that would improve the carbon intake.
Yeah, so the projects would be forest management plan. So certain cuttings to your property would enhance your woodland, such as thinnings or gap selection, just to help enhance your forest overall health and environment.
Yeah, the reason why I asked that question is NRCS under the Climate Smart program also has programs like that. Do you be an alternative to that or an enhancement of that?
That is a really good question. I'm not entirely sure of an answer to that at this time, but I can definitely give you some contact information to
We do have our climate smart guy here, I think, so maybe he'll answer that for you.
My real concern, $500 they can do a project. Do you add to that, or I got to take either or?
To be determined.
I believe it would be either or typically.
Okay. Who's next?
Hi, at the last year's meeting here, I signed up for an evaluation on one of these projects. And I ran into some major impediments. I have a 60-acre woodlot, been harvested about 10 years ago. And they only qualified me for 39 acres. Two reasons behind that is because by pulling tax maps, you don't have the accurate area of the woodlot that I'm paying taxes on, because the town does not post an accurate number. The second issue is that you discounted all of the land that might be a clearing or roads or wet portions. So that really cuts down the economic payback of carbon credits, because your contracts require that I can't do anything more than your general rules on the rest of the land that's not being paid for. So do you have any comments about those issues?
We deal with the state tax map problem all the time, and we just, we're happy to just kind of enter that data manually and do that. I think in terms of the eligibility requirements, yeah, I mean, we are looking to basically enroll areas that are kind of most likely to be harvested commercially. So we might exclude areas that are not forest or accessible or wetlands, because again, the goal is to kind of take harvests that were places that were commercially harvested and kind of grow them out a little bit longer than they historically have been. Going to answer that.
Sure. Economically, carbon programs might not be a good fit for everyone. Ideally, the goal of our program and the challenge that both AFS and Renoster are addressing is this idea that harvests are not bad, and harvests can happen and we can do them sustainably. And that carbon credit, the idea being that by waiting a little bit longer, you get bigger trees, you get more value. Of course, that's not going to happen all the time. Sometimes you wait longer and your forest will just die. Like, don't do this if you just have fir or something, right? I'm not a forester, but that's my understanding. So it really is a question of what species you have on your property. And that's why, Renoster has an outreach forester. He's standing right there, Ted Wright. We're really lucky to have Ted work for us. He's super knowledgeable. But that is, one of the reasons that it's more of a conversation than anything.
Particularly for the Renoster team, where the term is 30 years. Would there be any adjustment to deal over that length of time with the effects of inflation? In other words, you might be getting half of what you started out with towards the end.
Yeah, so
less than half.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So the offtake agreements that we're trying to create right now have inflation built in. So it's 10 to 15 to 25 net dollars an acre now. And they would get renegotiated after 10 years. So if the carbon prices go up, you get more money there too. And if you don't want us to go and sell your credits for you, you can keep your credits. You can try to sell them on your own. We can put you in touch with brokers. They are your credits. And so most people just want to check. But I mean, if you want to go through that process of trying to sell your carbon credits on the market, maybe you can get more money off them. I feel like you do that.
Seems to me that these carbon credits only benefit two organizations. The polluting companies that are buying them, the more they buy, the more they can pollute, and the landowners. But when you manage a forest and harvest the timber, there's a huge multiplier effect. The landowner benefits, forester, the logger, the trucker, the mills. It helps. It's going to hurt our economy if we start tying up our woods and not harvesting timber. And every one of these programs, it either delays or stops timber harvest. And that's going to hurt us.
I share your concern, quite frankly. As an economist, I think Brian, I know Brian, there are two Brians in that, but one of them says carbon is the most destructive product exactly because you lose the multiplier effect. And I think we can address this in two ways. One, through initiatives like LD39, we can start working to make sure that we know which carbon programs are operating in the state, that we have a sense of which mill sheds are being the most affected. And the other thing that we can do is we can support the programs that are benefiting small land that still allow some harvesting. Our incentives are very different. The large corporate programs have an incentive to shut down as much harvesting as possible. As we're working with small landowners, we're here for a healthy forest, and we know that that includes harvest. I would also say that because we have a shorter term program, we're really thinking about the life cycle of the trees and the life cycle of your rotation. A lot of the species in Maine have 40 fairly long harvest rotation, and our programs are really meant to just push you really from one product class to another. Renoster feels very strongly that the goal is really not to keep you from harvesting, but to have you harvest saw logs instead of pulpwood. Saw logs are veneer quality stuff instead of pallet wood. And so, I would say I share your concern, and that's something that we need to work together as a forest industry. Because forest carbon can be a great tool and a great opportunity, but we do need to be careful.
We have time for two more questions. We've got one down at where Olivia is.
Oh, this is work? This is working?
Yep.
They say an economist is somebody who knows the price of everything is the value of nothing. That's fairly well understood. Now, I think I heard you say you'll pay $15 to $25. I heard you say you'll pay up to $240. So I'd like you to explain what the difference is.
Ours is per year.
So the $200 to $300 you would be offered per eligible acreage, that total amount would be 200 to 300 would be multiplied by the eligible acreage you have, and that total amount would be spread across a 20-year plan where you would be paid on the annual. You would receive 20% upon enrollment, and then the remaining 80 would be spread into different amounts per year.
So those would be essentially the same.
Are your numbers per year?
200 to 300 multiplied by total would just be that spread out. So I'm not sure.
Yeah. So you're still kind of contemplating, or so you're not sure if it is apples to apples. Is that the issue? Yeah. Wait, hold on. Wait, sorry. These folks will be. Are you downstairs, Mac? Do you have a booth downstairs? Or you have one here? You'll be here all day.
Yeah.
And the Renoster folks are up here, but they also have a booth downstairs. So these are great questions.
Yeah, I'll say most land in Maine is probably going to accumulate between 0.8 and maybe at the max 2 tons per year, and carbon credits are basically selling for $30 a ton right now, maybe a little bit more. So that's
My question, my husband and I are getting older. Our kids have 0 interest. They all live out of state. What happens if you sign up for a 30-year doozy-doo and we die?
So specifically with our program and the 20-year contract is, if the land was passed in possession for any purpose, contract is still going to be associated with that land. And we will do our part in communicating and working with the new landowners to figure out whether they want to continue where it was left off, if they want to build something new, or if possibly want to terminate. Typically, there are fees with termination, but we will do our part to work with them to make sure that everything that can't be done will be done.
yeah, the contract will follow the deed, essentially.
Great. We have to wrap up because we're trying to catch up with time. We have our next presentation that's coming up. So thank you very much, Renoster and Antioch. So the next presenter is somebody that I have a personal connection to, Tom Wessels. He's a new Mainer, I'd like to say, but he has had connections to Maine for a while. He's now living here full time. But I've known him since I was a grad student at Antioch Graduate School back in 1999. And he was one of my professors. And he was the professor that convinced me that I could do this. I can be in the environmental science world. And he really challenged his students to think about ecology in a way that was thoughtful, deep, but simple. And so I've always carried that, and I'm thrilled that today we get to host him as our keynote speaker. He's got a lot of different hats that he wears, but he is what he's called himself, a terrestrial ecologist, and he's a professor emeritus at Antioch University New England, so he's no longer there. But he founded a master's degree program in conservation biology. So I was able to take, while that wasn't my major, I was able to take a few of his classes, which I was really grateful for. He's the author of numerous books, with his most recent being New England's Roadside Ecology, Explore 30 of the region's unique natural areas. And he's conducted workshops on ecology, natural history, and sustainability throughout the United States for over 3 decades. And he and his wife, Marcia, like I said, live in Maine, they live on Mount Desert Island. And we are thrilled to have him. So if I could have Tom come on up. So his presentation is very typical. I want to say that as far as for Tom, his class, you'd go in and he'd say, this is the concept. We're going to have a conversation about it. Oh, and you go into the natural world and you observe that concept. You write a paper and you turn it in. And I thought, okay, but he was right. It really required getting in to the woods or into the streams or in the natural world to see these concepts. You could teach them as much as you could in the classroom, but it wasn't the same until you were out in the world discovering it yourself. So thank you very much for giving me that opportunity. So today what he's going to be doing is he's going to have a bunch of slides that he's never seen before, photos that we've collected from members and from our collection with our land trust lands and whatnot, and he's going to interpret them for us. And I'm going to have it on this as well for you to look at. So I'll get that set up. But I'll have Tom come up and just do a quick introduction himself.
Thanks, Jen. So I guess I'm best known in terms of my work for interpreting forest disturbance histories. I think that's what we're going to see a lot of today, or evidence of various disturbances, and I'm going to talk about the evidence and how individuals can use it to better understand the history of their woodlands. So the idea was to have participants send in photos they thought were interesting or things they might be curious about. And so I don't know what we're going to see, but I have a feeling there'll be enough material there to keep us all somewhat entertained, I hope. Okay. You know, what might be good is I have one of those mics and I stand down front where I can actually see the image. All right, there we go. Okay, so here we have a photo. It looks like we have a beach in the foreground and then some coniferous trees behind it. And what I'm sort of drawn to is the base of that beech tree. You can see it like a white rim around the lower 1 foot or so. That is certainly, I'm guessing, a colony of lichens that have gone there. Lichens often will grow on our trees, especially if you get down into the coastal region of the state, where we get a lot of ocean fog. You could really see heavy lichen loading on the trees. And I should mention, lichens and trees are in a mutually beneficial relationship here. Lichens are picking up a lot of nutrients out of the air. And then when you get a heavy rain, the drippage from coming down through those lichens, some of that nutrient comes down as liquid sort of fertilizer into the roots of the trees when the lichens fall off. It only makes sense. If you can, you know, sort of benefit your host, you're going to benefit yourself because your host lives longer, you live longer, reproduce more. Now, beech has a very smooth bark. That is a tree that evolved in the equatorial tropics, where you not only have lichens, but you can get like a lot of epiphytes growing on trees like bromeliads and orchids. And the weight of those things can often rip trees apart. So beech evolved early on a very smooth bark to restrict epiphytes from growing on it. So it often doesn't have a lot of growth on it. In this case, down to the base, I think we're getting splash from rainfall coming up, which is bringing up nutrients onto the bark. The lichens are taking advantage of that. But if the person who's here that took this shot, there's something else they're interested in, maybe they could let me know. All right, well, I guess we'll go on to the next one. And if there are any questions that people have when the slide is up, please just raise your hand. I think we'll take them at the point if they relate to that slide. All right, so here we have definitely a live snap tree. The tree on the right there was alive when it snapped off. Generally, our trees, when they're live snap, are going to break a good distance up their trunks. If they don't uproot, then they'll snap off there. Our standing dead trees, if they're going to create deadfall, often break off right near ground level because they develop a rot collar at their base. So for decay, you need both oxygen and moisture. The rotting roots of the tree are wicking moisture up, so you get this advanced rate of decay at the base of the tree. And eventually that becomes a weakness zone, and then the tree just snaps off there. So by seeing where trees break off, you can often tell if they're live snap or dead snap. The tree in the middle of the shot here has been really impacted by carpenter ants, and pileated woodpeckers have been going after those ants. Sometimes you'll come across hemlock trees. I see this most with hemlock. Well, you'll see these rectangular, what used to be pileated woodpecker holes in them that have completely healed over. When you see that, if you don't see any active holes in a tree like that, that means the pileated actually extinguished the ant colony and actually saved the tree. So it looks like they can be doing a lot of damage, but sometimes actually do benefit the tree. So I guess we'll go on to the next one unless there's any questions about that. All right, so here I was talking about lichens on trees. So here we have a bunch of lichens on here, and I'm guessing, looking at the amount of lichen growth here, we are either in a really moist forest or we're in a forest down by the coast. To get lichen growth like this, you really need usually a lot of moisture. And when you're on the coast, cold ocean fogs are coming in frequently, creating a lot of lichen growth. So I think that's what's happening in this forest here, unless if the person that took the shot has another question in mind. Yeah.
hopefully work. Okay. That was at Forestone Mountain.
Uh-huh.
So I was curious about that.
Okay, what elevation were you at?
It wasn't quite, I was maybe halfway up.
So like 2,000 feet?
Okay.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
as we get up, higher in our mountains, we are getting more cloud effects. We're getting a lot more moisture coming in, so I'm guessing that's what was going on here. All right, so here we have obviously a footpath going through a young woodland. I can't tell if these are aspens or not. The leaf color reminds that they might be. And I don't know if that is actually a footpath or that is the remnants of a stone fence. It looks like further on, I'm seeing remnants of a stone fence. If that's the case, we're definitely looking at former agricultural land. And if I walk into a site like this, one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to look on the superficial topography of the ground. In our forests that have been around for quite a while, because of our frequent wind events, snow and ice flooding events, and live trees being taken down by these things, our forest floors start getting carpeted in what are called pits and mounds. So when a live tree comes down, its roots rip up out of the ground, creating a depression. And then as those roots decay, the excavated earth settles to form a mound. So you get these pits and mounds. Large pits and mounds in our forest can be visible for about 1,000 years after that tree came down. So after a couple of centuries, our forest floors become carpeted in. But if I go into a forest and I'm in a situation where the surface topography is smooth and even and not lumpy, I know I'm in a forest that was agricultural land that was plowed in the past, and the plowing removed those pits and mounds. And then it could have been for plowing to produce a hayfield or plowing for a crop field. Then I will wander out to the boundaries of that parcel to see if I can pick up stone fencing. And if I do, and if I get fences that have a lot of small fist-sized rocks in them, I know I'm looking at a former crop field. This crop field is the only sites that generate small stone and then necessitate the removal. If I go around and I can't find any small rocks anywhere, stone dumps in stone walls and stuff, just larger rocks in the rock walls surrounding a parcel, then I'll know it's a hayfield. So in this case, I can't quite tell from the shot, but the ground surface looks sort of smooth and even to me as I'm looking off in there. So we're probably looking at one of the two here, a hayfield or a crop field that was abandoned pretty recently. I'm not seeing any multiple trunked or coppice trees. I'm not seeing evidence of stumps. So I'm guessing this is agricultural land that was maybe abandoned, 30 years or so before the picture was taken. And I don't know if the person's here that took the shot and they can comment on any of that, that'd be great. No, all phantom photographs. Interesting. I mean, who took these things if they're not here, right? All right, I don't know if this is associated with the last shot. It could be, but I am seeing evidence of stumps in here. It looks like stumps. I think that I have a laser pointer, which might help. But I'm seeing that this right here, this back here, these look like stumps to me. They could be boulders that are covered in moss or leaf litter, but I don't think they are. So this is not the same image as the last shot. This is an area that has been worked on in the past, that was logged. And the ground does, as I look back in there, does look pretty lumpy to me from pits and mounds. So I don't know if the person who took the shot had a specific question about this slide or not. All right, we'll move on to the next one. All right, so here's a classic stone fence, and this is what's called a double stacked stone fence. 2 rows of large rocks stacked up a few feet apart, and then the inside infilled with smaller rocks. I can't see it because of the leaf litter on top there, but I'm quite confident if we went to that wall and we pulled back that leaf litter, we'd find a lot of fist-sized stones in the middle of that fence. So again, a double stacked wall like this, very classic evidence of former crop fields, where it made it easy to remove the rocks at the double walls, and then the space in between, the smaller stuff could just be dumped in. Yeah, so the question was, having smaller stones in the middle, would that make it more likely that stones would topple off? Actually, you know, all of our walls, if they're not maintained, will begin to fall down. There's freeze and thaw cycles will move that rock around. But generally, whether it's a single stack wall or a double stack wall, they will come apart if they're not maintained. Yeah. I'll just repeat it.
Probably hay ground. The walls have stood remarkably well, and I've got to go back and check and see if they're double stacked or small stones or not, but my summation, having climbed over them, is that they're not, that they're just big rocks piled together. So I just was wondering why they lasted so long.
Well, I mean, it depends on the type of rock. If they are big boulders, they're going to do a better job of standing up than if they're smaller. And it could be also the work of the person to put them up. Some people are more fastidious at really working their walls. Other people just slap them up. So I think a combination of the type of rock and the builder that would be a factor. Yeah. Yes, so the walls were intentionally built with two basically stone walls set a couple feet apart with that gap in there for a stone dump for that smaller rock. Yeah, and a lot of the rock was removed by children on these family farms, and that just gave them a good place to take it and dump it. Actually, even throw it if they had a good arm. All right, so here we have definitely a coppice tree. It's a hardwood. I can't quite tell the species from the image, but you can see it has 1, 2, 3, 4 trunks in there. And so this is, you know, evidence of logging, obviously. We can get coppice trees from fire as well. If we do get wildfires that heat kill a hardwood tree or a pitch pine, because pitch pines are only conifer, they can stump sprout, they will grow up to be basically multiple trunk trees as well. But in Maine, the likelihood of seeing that as related to fire is pretty uncommon, unless you're down in coastal Maine. Certainly the 47 fires did about 200,000 acres of impact in coastal Maine. But as you get in interior Maine, fire is a pretty uncommon entity. So a best guess is that you're looking at evidence of logging. And you can often tell the size of the original tree is if you come down the centers of each of the trunks towards ground level, you're to come down to basically the very basal diameter of the tree at ground level. And generally fires, if they are going to kill trees around here, are taking smaller stock. They usually don't kill much stuff above 18 inches in diameter. So if you're getting original trees or 2 feet in diameter, 30 inches in diameter, that's really good evidence of logging. It's very unusual to see fires killing trees of that size. They will basal scar them, but they usually don't kill them. All right, so here's a good example of, you know, a live tree coming down. Again, these look like spruce, and they're all sort of going the same direction. So the best guess is that was a wind event. You can generally pin down wind events by looking at the direction the wind came from. Winds out of the west are mostly associated with thunderstorm microbursts. Winds out of the east, historically associated with nor'easters or hurricanes, but that is really changing. You know, Governor Mills mentioned the storms last year about this time in January. We were getting winds out of the southeast down on the coast where I am at 75 miles an hour. That's hurricane force winds, but this was not a tropical event at all. It's just part of the climate change impacts we're starting to see. We're starting to get wind events like we've never seen before. But generally, if you find trees all falling the same way, it's wind. You can figure out where the wind came from by, especially if you just even have just the pits and mounds. If you stand in the pit and look over if you stand on the mound and look over the pit, you're looking at the direction the wind came from. So you can pin down these events, and you can date them if you have, let's say, pits and mounds. If you have the right type of tree growing on the mounds, like a shade tolerant early successional tree like an aspen or a paper birch, you can estimate the age of the tree and pin down the wind event. But if you don't have something like that, you cannot really date wind events just from the pits and mounds, because like I said, they can last a long, long time. Well, obviously, a little cabin here. I was going to say a sugar shack, but I don't really see any venting for, you know, taking down maple sap, and the forest doesn't look like the right type of forest for really sugaring in. So I'm wondering if the person who had this photo has a question about it. Okay. Obviously a forest gnome like me. But this must be, you know, I'm guessing what we're looking at here is probably an old stack of hemlock bark. You know, I haven't seen one intact like this, but hemlock bark, of course, was harvested for the tan, for tanning leathers. And because of the amount of tan in the bark, it is quite rot resistant. Now, I have come across old mounds that I know were from it, but the bark's completely rotted down. But to see one this intact is pretty cool, because I don't think I've ever seen that. So is the person who took the shot here?
I know him, and I know that you're right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be really interested to know where the shot was taken, that's all. But,
In the Lakeville Plantation of
cool.
northern Washington.
Yeah.
Pile of hemlock bark on my woodlot that was harvested and for some reason never transported out. So my question is, do you have any sense of when that industry ended? Like when would that pile?
It sort of depends geographically where you are, like in Maine. It didn't all go away at the same time. So northerly regions were doing more hemlock harvesting later than southerly. So I'd have to see the area to sort of guess. All right, so here's a tree that has a pretty major scar in it. My guess is one of two things happened here. And I wish I could see this shot from the side. But if this tree is bowing like this, where that scar is on it, that was a large tree that got bent over and its main trunk broke off. And this was the lowest living branch associated with that, just below that breakage point, and then took off to be the new trunk that has grown up. I'm guessing that's what's going on here, because I think I do see that lower, wider portion of the trunk bowing like this. Whenever you see bowing like this in a tree, that is a tree that's been bowed over by weight, either snow or ice loading or another tree landing on it. And if it caused a breakage at the same time, then again, the lowest limb or twig takes off to become the new main trunk. So is the person who took the shot here? Yes. Was that bowed like that, Jen? Yeah. Okay. All right. So here we have some nice maple leaves and a little bit of moss on the ground. This moss here is most likely growing on a rock. Usually in a hardwood stand, you're not going to find moss like this unless it's elevated up a bit, because the leaf litter would cover it and smother it. So I guess that's what's going on here. But if the person who took the shot has a particular question? Okay. All right, so here we have a tree that looks again like it may have live snapped. I can't tell if it's completely broken off or not, but there's a breakage there. And then we're getting this Ganoderma growing out of it, which is basically a wood decomposing fungus. It's not a parasitic fungus, so it grows on decomposing wooden trees. It can grow on live trees, but it's actually feeding on the interior dead wood. And this is also called artist conch, because this is the fungus that if you take off that white spore surface on the underside, if you start scratching into it, you can develop an image on it. All right, here we are back at a very young stand of trees. Again, this ground looks very smooth and even to me. I'm not seeing any lumpiness in it, no pits and mounds. So again, we're looking at former agricultural land that was either crop field or hay field. And again, Not seeing any coppice trees, not seeing any evidence of stumps, unless that is one right back there, but I can't quite tell. So my best guess is this is probably an area that was crop field or hay field. And I should mention, early on in the 1700s, early 1800s, there was a lot more crop field on the smaller farms in Maine than we see today, because a lot of those farms were self-reliant farms and people needed to grow their own crops. And a lot of those crops were involved with grains, one of which was flax, and flax was grown not just for the grain, but for fiber in the stem to make linens. The reason I mention this is that when rail starts coming in and linking rural areas in Maine to urban areas, that brings on market dairy farming. And with that, also grain is being brought in from Western New York and the Midwest at that point. And farmers just give up grain production or crop production and just say, I want to buy my grains and crops with my dairy proceeds. And so a lot of the areas that were originally crop field convert then into hay fields or pastures. My guess is that this may have been crop field early on, but probably at abandonment was most likely a hay field at that point in time. Yeah.
So, Forestry closed. Here,
Oh, God, I didn't even see that. Okay, so like this here and that there and that there is the fencing around it. Very good. I didn't pick that up. And that is showing a real big difference, because if you do look behind that enclosure or in the foreground, you're not going to see regeneration like you're seeing here. So I completely missed that, but thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, she said that, I'll go back, that right here in the center of the slide, there's a post there. And there's a post there and a post there. She was pointing out there's a little enclosure there, a deer enclosure, or I should say exclosure, to keep the deer out, that's allowing that regeneration right in there to grow up. So that's what she caught that I couldn't see, because I have much older eyes, I guess. All right, so here again, we have another one of these polypore fungi. In this case, I'm not sure what the species is, so I don't know if this is just a decomposer or a parasite. Some of our polypores are just decomposers, like the birch polypore. Others are parasitic, and I'm not sure about the species here, but it looks like it's growing on probably a sugar maple is what it looks like it's growing on. But if the person that took the shot knows more about this, that might be good to hear. All right, next slide. So this looks like almost like a rubbing. Something rubbed on that bark to remove it, and I'm not quite sure what. And it looks like it's not that high off the ground. I mean, I hope this could be bare scratch marks. I don't see claw marks in it, but it could be something like that. Did the person who took the shot, are they here? Yes, there is barbed wire, right? Well, I think that's barbed wire. I don't think it could be a twig coming off of this branch here, but it looks like it could be barbed wire. That may be bending down there. It could be a blaze, but it's not a very good one. I would make one good more bold than that, but it's a good guess. Is there? That could be too, but I don't know. Usually, if you're going to get icing from a river, you're going to get a really crisp line on it. And I'm not seeing that crisp line. So, yeah, not sure. All right, so these are, I can't tell. They may be, I'm guessing they're either fir or they could be yellow birch. They're fir, that's what that looks like to me. So our small seeded shade tolerant trees like spruce, fir, yellow birch, are really good colonizing boulders in woodlands to get coated in moss. Because moss is a really good germination site for these small seeded trees, which then grow up on that moss and then just wrap their roots right over that boulder. And actually, many people think this might be an impediment for a tree like that, but actually, If those roots go down the ground and start clasping that boulder, it really becomes a good anchorage for them. And they become a lot harder to uproot than trees that are just basically rooted into the soil. But yeah, again, our small seeded shade tolerant trees do very, very well seeding into moss mats on boulders. Yeah.
People, my land is so fertile, even the rocks grow.
So he says he's bragging that his land's so fertile, even the rocks grow trees. Yeah. So, but I contend a lot of other people have this too. So you're not that special, but. All right, so this looks to me like it is possibly laid up stone. So this might be part of an old dam for a millwork. You know, pretty much all of our streams throughout Maine, not uncommon to find millwork along them because, you know, the early settlers here, they needed mills for grist mills and sawmills, and that's where you'd find them along, you know, our streams and rivers. So often dams, millwork, things like that, very commonly seen. All right, so here, I think we've got some big boulders here, and we got a stilted rooted, looks like birch here. And I think I see gaps underneath those roots. So that didn't grow up on a rock, I don't think, from what I can see in the image. That may have been on either growing up on a stump that was adjacent to whatever this thing is here, which looks like a rock. And if it was, then it was most likely a stump of a spruce or a pine. Those are the trees that really are responsible for creating nurse stumps because we have wood that rots slowly from the outside in, and after about 30 years get coated in a mat of moss. And of course, that's a good germination site for a lot of small seeded shade-tolerant trees that then seed into that moss mat, grow their roots over the stump and down to the ground. Then when the stump rots away, you have these exposed stilted roots. I should mention you can also get stilted rooted trees on nurse logs. So these would be logs that were either not harvested but cut down, and again, they'd be spruce or pine, that after about 25 years have shed their bark, start developing a moss mat, and then you can get a line of trees growing up on that log. And when that log rots away, you'll have a straight line of trees with the above ground roots tying them together in a line, because the first roots growing out from a tree on a nurse log are growing on the top of the log. And so if you ever see that, a straight line of trees with stilted roots and roots tying them together in a straight line, that's definitely a nurse log. And the third way we can get them is on the tip-ups of live trees that come down to wind event. We can get trees seeding into those tip-ups, and then they snake their roots down through them. And then after that old down tree's root system rots away and you have a pillow, you'll have a stilted rooted tree with the roots sort of flowing out almost like the delta of a river into that mound. So we can get stilted rooted trees in one of three ways: on nurse stumps, nurse logs, or on tip-ups. So this looks to me like a stone dump. I can't tell if this is actually built into a fence or a wall. So my guess is that up here would have been agricultural land, hayfield or crop field, and the stones weren't built into a wall, they're just dumped over the embankment. When you see that, if this is the case, if this was crop field or hayfield up here, it means down here that this was woodlot. The only times that walls were built, they were built to keep livestock in pastures or out of crop fields or hayfields. So if you had let's say a hayfield or a crop field that had no surrounding pasture land, it wouldn't be fenced in with walls. I mean, building walls is a lot of work. The stone would just be taken out the extremities and dumped. So I think that's what we're looking at here, is a stone dump from an area of a crop field or hayfield that abutted a woodlot where there weren't any livestock. And is the person here who took the shot? I'm so intrigued that all these people take shots that don't show up.
Since you're on the subject right now, I'm interested in to what degree can you determine the motivations for building a stone wall or a rock wall from actually looking at it today? You can imagine some of them. I come from a town full of these things everywhere you look, and some of them look like they were probably boundary lines.
some of them look like they might be, as you say, demarcated cropland from forest land. But what, can't you tell anything from that by looking at it? But more specifically, we had a lot, it is said that we had a lot of sheep back in the sheep boom, about 120 years ago. But I don't know whether this type of rock keeps the sheep in or not.
Okay, so we do get stone fences on boundaries, but they weren't built there to mark boundaries. That's a lot of work. You want to mark a boundary, blaze trees, drive in some stakes. You don't need to build a wall that you're going to put up maybe 10 feet a day to mark a boundary. So they're always built to control livestock. Now, it's true, most stone fences around here only went up to about waist height. It's one thing picking up rocks like this, quite another doing something like that. So what they do is they come up to about waist height, but then they'd use cross poles and a rail up top of them, and that was adequate for keeping sheep or cows or horses in those areas. So yeah, general rule of thumb, they came up to about waist height, but if you're building a wall to waist height, you're building it to control livestock. All right, so here we have a stream and a beautiful image of the sun either rising or setting back there. And I don't know if the person is here that took this shot had a specific question. All right, and I'll move on to the next one. All right, again, another looks like stone fence, running off. And this is what's called a single stack wall. One row of large rocks stacked up. Usually, if that's what the case is all the way around this parcel, then we're looking at a hayfield or we're looking at a pasture. And to separate them, if sites were solely used for pasture, they retain their pits and mounds. So areas that were just pastured around here, farmers went in, they clear cut the site. If it was hardwoods, they'd stump sprout. That'd be the first forage for the livestock. Once everything was denuded, they just pull the livestock out and spread grass seed on the bare ground. But the stumps weren't pulled and the ground wasn't plowed at all. So areas that were solely used as pasture retained their pits and mounds, although they're tamped down by the hooves of livestock. So they're not as obvious or as bold as they would be in an area that was always woodlot and never opened up for any agricultural activity at all. Yeah.
Looking at the shape of those rocks, looks like they may have been scrounged from a quarry.
Well, yes, because I was looking at these two. These look like possibly remnant quarry stones. They certainly weren't tumbled in the glacier, so that's a good observation. All right, so here we have, again, a boulder and a stand of fairly young trees, and it looks to me, again, like the ground, unless this is a woods road back here, which it may be, because it looks like a little depression, but even in the foreground, the ground is looking smooth and even again. And again, I can't tell if that is a coppice tree there or not. It may be, but it looks like the bulk of these are smaller, single stem trees. I'm not seeing stumps. Again, I'm guessing agricultural land abandoned somewhat recently. So again, we've seen a lot of this. So maybe the major takeaway for all of you, when you're out in your woodlands, keep an eye on the ground as you're moving around. If you're in smooth, even ground, even if it's sloping, you're looking at former crop fields or hay fields. You can pick up that image pretty quickly versus ground that's going to be really lumpy from pits and mounds. All right, so here we just have some stones. I can't tell if this is a remnant of a stone dump or not. It may have just been dropped like this for the glaciers. Hard for me to say. It looks like we do have coppice trees in here. This looks to me like it might be a coppice red maple, that one there, that one back there as well. So probably some evidence of logging going on in here. But is the person here who took the shot, have any specific question about it?
And because it isn't very flat, I was wondering if that was because it hadn't been logged, but you're saying it's, and we have land trust folks in this room, so maybe they know better, but.
I mean, it's irregular. I think I do see like a pit and mound back here, that area. So it could have been former pasture. It could have always been woodlot. Generally, areas that were always in woodlot, those pits and mounds are pretty dramatic. So I'm guessing probably pasture was abandoned, then was logged later on. All right, so here we have obviously a stream, a lot of rock exposed within it, a really mossy bank there, pretty much solid hardwood stand going back in. And I don't know if the person here that took the shot has a particular question on it.
Expertise on our land trust land. This is another parcel. This one is in Ellsworth. And for me, it was the transition or the contrast between the forest right to the edge and then the other rocks. And I didn't know if it was erosion or if this is a sign of upland, maybe some upland issues.
I mean, it looks to me like a stream channel. I mean, one thing about it, I'm not seeing any meanders in it. I mean, if it goes like this straight for a long while, then it may be a canal that was built at one time for something. That's a possibility, because canals run in straight lines. Our streams don't, they meander. So I walk it to see. All right, so again, we have another, this is a glacial boulder. It's been rounded. It is in the glacier, all the rocks carried by the glacier were slowly tumbled. And when they hit other rocks, they were chipping off corners and edges, and everything just gets rounded down. And we have, some deadfall in here. These are all deadfall trees. I can't see the stump where they came from, but they broke off near ground level, as I mentioned. And again, a young stand of trees. I'm not picking up any stumps or coppicing in here. So again, looks like somewhat recently abandoned agricultural land. And I can't tell from the slide if the ground is smooth and even or not. It has to be on the site, but yeah.
Rabbit. Always wonder how these babies out of nowhere in the woods.
Yeah, so he mentioned what we're looking at here is a glacial erratic. It may be. We'd have to know what the bedrock is below it. So if that rock is the same rock composition as the bedrock below it, it's just a glacial boulder. Glacial erratics are boulders that have a different bedrock composition than they lie on. So you have to sort of know what the bedrock is there. So if you get in areas around here, like where you get exposed granite mountains and you're on granite and then you see a basaltic boulder on it, that is an erratic. It's a different type of rock. But yeah, all these rocks generally get quarried off of, prominences, usually the south side of prominences. And then they get tumbled, and they may be taken 100 miles before they're reduced down to clay or sand or whatever. And so when the glacier receded, any boulders that were in it just got dropped into place. Yeah, question.
One suggestion I have actually looking at this and ignoring the boulder is the 3 or 4 larger pieces of deadwood that we see down there.
Yeah.
Especially if we look at the 2 that are crossed right in the center.
Like in here?
Right. The one on the right, you can see it's close in to us. Oh, no, come down. But anyway, is a nice, clear saw cut.
Oh, you can see that. I can't make that out. So,
yes,
that's right there.
Oh, right. You're seeing there is another. I was going to say that is a sawed off chunk.
Very good.
That's a bolt right there. But if we come down, say, if you come to the bottom, with this bottom center, slow down, not wiggle much longer. Just actually, and you're a wild man for that point.
I'm just nervous. I can't take it up here.
I guess what I'm saying is that
I'll just try to be
there. Now, follow really gently to the right of that the 2 that are crossed. Real gently to the right. No, that's the left.
All right.
Okay. Down a little bit. You're all these folks around me see what I'm talking about, and you're pointing. But anyway, you can actually see on the crossed ones what's very clearly a saw cut across that. So I look at that and I say, hey, this very likely. There it is.
Oh, okay, guys, I can thank that.
Thanks, Tom. Is I look and I say, hey, somebody very likely was in here doing some TSI, thinning things out,
and haven't taken away everything yet for firewood. Good eye. But anyway, yeah, there's human effort involved in those deadfalls already. Well, deadfalls are probably human falls that are now dead. Very good. I'm not, my eyes are not that good. I can see it now. They pointed it out, but I didn't pick up on it initially. So. My cataract surgery. Yeah, he's saying if those cataract surgery, he wouldn't even see the boulder. So. All right, so here's another one of these polypores. This is definitely a decomposing fungus. So this is just on a dead branch that's come down. And, it's very important these decomposers are recycling all this woody material back in the soil for nutrients for the next crop of trees that are going to grow up. So they're a very critical, important role. And I think, here in Maine, I think we've got probably almost 1,000 different fungi decomposers. And that's really important because it's what gives rise to what's called a lot of repetition of function. If we just had a handful and then we lost some of those, it would really impact our forests in a very detrimental way. So that's one of the beauties about the resiliency of forests. All critical roles have thousands of different species doing them. So if we lose one or two, the forest is fine. All right, so this is, it looks like it could be a weevil-hit white pine. Generally, our white pines, when they are young, generally less than about 15 years of age, and they're growing in full sunlight, they get a very fat leader or terminal shoot. And that's what's attractive to the white pine weevil. That's a native insect that lays its eggs in that terminal shoot. The eggs hatch out in a larvae, drill into the shoot, eat it, kill it, and then the tier of branches just below it take off, become the new trunks. Now, generally, if you're in a stand where you're seeing lots of white pine that are growing up, 5 to maybe 30 feet in height and then fork into two trunks, you're looking at the first cohort of trees that invaded a once open site. So it could have been after a clear cut. Most likely around here, it's after land abandonment. And so it's during a mast year when white pine is setting out a lot of seed. So the trees grow up and they can sense the surrounding trees. They only invest in 2 new trunks to grow up. But if you get a tree that's growing by itself in the open, all the trunks in that bottom tier of limbs will take off and grow up. So the trees have a very good sense of the amount of light they have to work with, and they adjust their growing conditions based on that. So we often think that we're pretty good at light. Trees have 3 times as many light sensors as we have. Since they're stuck in place and they need light, they have to be very, very sensitive to it, and they grow very much in response to where the light is. So oftentimes I'll be out in the woods and I'll see a tree that on one side has all these branches jutting out and the other side has no branches at all. And that tells me I'm on the old border of what used to be woodlot versus open agricultural land. Just because the tree knew it had shade back here, it's not going to invest in branches back there into the woodlot. It's going to invest them all in the area going out into the open area. Well, here we have a nice headstone. It looks like it might. Who's got good eyes? I'm going to guess Emma, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It is. All right. And so I'm guessing, I don't know if this is a lone stone here or it's a lone stone. So do you know the history of this here?
It's just it's on one of our properties. It's in the middle of absolutely a little rise. And it was obviously an old farm. And this was an old one single grave.
That's pretty unusual to just see a single grave like that. So
The young girl, I can't remember her age. She was less, I think she was a teenager, maybe.
Interesting. Yeah, it's pretty unusual. I mean, usually you have family plots and stuff, but I mean, there may be other graves here that aren't marked. That's a possibility too, but. All right, obviously we have a nice cliff face here, a lot of moss growing on it and probably some lichen too. And I'm guessing this is granite. That's what it looks like to me. But is there a particular question about this shot? Okay. All right, here we were talking about this before. This is a yellow birch, again on a boulder. And
in here, my laser point, in here, there must have been something else in here because we're getting these stilted roots. If there was nothing in here, this root would have just come straight down like that into the ground. But there was material here to root through. So there may have been a tip up of another tree. There could have been something there. I'm not sure what. I'd have to be on site to look, but again, it germinated on this boulder and is doing quite well, even though it's perched on top of that rock. What's that? Fertile rock, yes. It's a fertile rock. All right, another stand of what looks like pretty young trees. Again, I don't think I'm seeing evidence of coppicing in there. We're getting a real fern layer under here. We do have some species of ferns that can really be problematic when they get like this. Hay-scented fern is one where they just clone out, and then they really make it difficult for regeneration to happen in a woodland. So a site like this, you don't have to get rid of the ferns, but you can come in even with just a weed whip and just sweep open little areas to get some regeneration going. And then as those trees come up, that fern mat will thin out. But if I was a landowner, I was trying to get regeneration, I'd be a little bit concerned about this. All right, so here we're either on a rock outcrop or a clay plain soil where the rocks cannot penetrate down into the ground. We have really, really superficial rooting here. This may be rock here. I'm not sure. If that's the case, this is just because it's up on this rock outcrop. But you can also see this on clay plains, particularly if you get down in the coast where you have marine clays. You'll often see trees very, very surfacely rooted because they can't get down in the clay. There's no oxygen down there to support the roots. But this looks like it might be on a rock outcrop here. Did I ever think that was earthworms? I've never seen earthworms remove this much material. So even the Asian ones, I've not seen remove this much material. And it looks to me like this right in here is actually rock. I don't know what that really light color would be if it wasn't rock.
Were those roots at one time underground?
They may have had, like, if this is on rock, they would have been in a mat of moss, which they've grown up and out of. But obviously, if this tree is still alive, which I'm guessing it is, they're making it off of that rock into deeper soil, and then just shunting the nutrients back in the tree from that.
I have one just like that, the large spruce, and there's definitely a clay plain. Clay on my land.
Yeah, so he's mentioning he has a tree like this that's on a clay plain. Yeah, Jeff.
I had always assumed that the earth had covered the roots and then got eroded away. But
they're growing up out of it. So roots, they're growing in diameter, but they're growing upwards as well. So oftentimes on pine trees, you look at the base of the trunk, you're going to see these roots that are way up out of the ground. They're actually bringing up soil with them. You'll often see around pines, they get a mound around the base of each tree because the roots are bringing that soil up with them. In this case, they're just growing up out of that material. Yeah, question.
Of course, I can't tell here what the surrounding ground was like, but I have some white spruce that I had planted in 1978. So planted them as little bitty 2-year bare root seedlings on abandoned agricultural ground that had been abandoned so long that we had at least an 8, sometimes maybe even a 10-inch organic mat, primarily of what I call just grass root mat before you got to any mineral soil. And over the 40-some years, very gradually, the shade got in there and the grass and the turf root mat no longer had anything to maintain themselves. Of course, there it's all organic, it's rotting, and as things continued to rot and rot and rot, everything became exposed, looked like twin trees to this. And so in that case, what it was we had a surface layer that was actually decayable root mass, really. Yeah. And as there was nothing any longer to sustain it, it decays, exposing the roots. But I have many like that in one area.
that I've watched over the last 46 years start looking like this. But my guess is that you're also getting, I mean, I don't doubt that you could have had the grass mat, which is all organic, rot away, but you also have some sort of impervious layer there. Those roots are layering out that, not that deep. So there's something else going on there too. And October snow, that, you mean this white stuff here? Well, maybe. I mean, if we're getting white on the tops here, that's a good observation. That could be snow. It could be moss under there. Yeah, that's a good observation. That's definitely a possibility. Good observation. I wish I had your eyes. Like, you're picking up stuff I'm not picking up here. All right, so another rock outcropping, and we have, looks like spruce growing on it, which does very well, as I mentioned, on rock, growing up on moss mats, very, very common. I don't know if whoever took the shot has a specific question about it. All right, next one.
This is our
Oh, this is their first oceanside parcel up in Washington County. Oh, I guess that's it. So do we have time for questions, Jen, or not? All right, so I think we can take questions, and I'll just come up this way. I've got a microphone, so.
I was going to take a picture of this, but I didn't get to it. So I have a tree. I think it's a hardwood, but I'm not really sure. Comes up like 3 or 4 feet. Perfect 90-degree angle. Goes over like 2 or 3 feet. Goes up perfect 90-degree angle.
So she has a tree that's growing like this. It's come up a few feet, bent over like this, then coming back up. That is a weight bent tree. That was a tree that was bent over, and the lowest branch or twig at the time took off to become the new trunk. This rest of the trunk down here was now in the understory shaded, and the tree just cut off energy from it and invested in that new trunk growing up. So you'll often see these, especially in young weight bent trees, they will go like that and then turn and go straight up. Yeah, and also, if you're in a forest, you're in a forest, sometimes this can happen in a forest of beech. I've seen it in forests of white oak. A lot of our trees, we can age them by just looking at the bark texture, like, pines, oaks, hemlocks, things like this. As they age, they get bigger bark plates, the fissures get deeper. But sometimes you could be in a stand of very old trees and you can't age them by the bark, because like beech doesn't make any bark texture, or white oak is constantly shedding its bark. But if you're in the canopy and you're seeing lots of elbows like that, where branches are going and then just turning straight up, and you're seeing a lot of that, that's probably a pretty darn old tree that's basically gone through a lot of icing and snow loading events. Other questions?
I'd like to just give a presentation if I could. If you had your 20 to 30 degree slope, and what I came across about 50 years ago was a cistern in the side of the hill. Actually, there was two of them separated. I presume stone wall bordered the field still at one area, but still quite steep and then flat. Assume that was the cheap water sources. Let's say stone coming down, like gathering runoff, and then into stone, large stone, small. I wonder if that's something that's quite common.
It's
water.
Yeah. It's a feature that is really not very common. I don't think I'd love to see a photo of it, but I think you're probably right. It sounds like it's definitely capturing water, which would indicate probably that steeper slope was pasture at the time. I should mention, sometimes you can get on slopes almost that steep. I've seen them on slopes this steep that were actually crop field. hard to imagine back in the 1700s, early 1800s, that people would have done that. But I have encountered them. And but again, if you could go down here at the cistern, if it's, you know, not smooth and even and it's lumpy, you're probably looking at pasture there.
But this actually was quite, so bad, probably wouldn't be what originally. Bringing, and this is the those by local and his father was the first 1905.
Right.
We have several cellar holes on our land, and in addition to everything else you talked about, is there anything we should be paying attention to in particular to understand when those cellars, or when those homes were abandoned?
So you're saying cellar holes on the property? So so one thing to look at is cellar hole design dramatically changes around late 1820s, 1830s. So if you're getting cellar holes that has a central basement in it, now the basement is different than a cellar. They become synonymous nowadays, but a basement was the foundation work on which the central chimney system sat. So the basement was always adjacent to the cellar hole where root crops were stored. So basement and cellar have become synonymous. We have to call our, you know, the area underneath our houses a basement. Well, originally the basement was the foundation work of the central chimney system. So if you have a central basement, a large mass of rock in the middle of the cellar hole, that is a house that predated 1820. If that is missing, if you just have a cellar hole and there's no basement in the middle of it, that means it's probably 1830s or later, because that's when cast iron wood stove technology becomes affordable to everybody. Central fireplace systems, which took up a lot of room in the house, are removed to make more room in the house. Chimneys go to the outside walls where the wood stoves are hooked in. So by looking at the foundation construction, basement or lack of basement, you can get a dating of, basically pre-1830 or after 1830. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. We're a little behind, but we do still have time for a break for lunch. And I wanted to give you a quick overview of that, but we are, Tom, are you going to be here selling books for a bit? Okay, so he's got some books in the foyer that he's selling and signing, and we really appreciate it. I believe there's one book that he's donated to our organization to either auction off or give as a door prize. We have to decide that. We appreciate that. And we've sold Tom's book, not sold, we've given books as a thank you gift. It's Reading the Forested Landscape. So we have had Tom's presence in our organization for a little while. So again, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. And we'll probably want to bring you outside and do one of these tours in the world. So we'll let you know when we can make a plan for that. So thank you very much. So we're going to move into a quick overview of the afternoon, but I'd like to introduce Jessica Leahy. She's a past president, and she's also a professor at University of Maine at the School of Forest Resources, and she's going to talk about a survey that's on screen.
Yeah, so this was in the January newsletter, hopefully also the February newsletter. It's been 10 years since Maine Woodland Owners has done a membership survey. So it's time to check in with the members. And also this year, we have 3 students who are benefiting from the survey questions. It'll either be part of their honors thesis, their master's capstone, or their PhD dissertation. Felipe is a Fulbright scholar from Columbia, and he's not here, but I have the 2 other students that when you see, you can either take a photo of the QR code now, but it'll also, you can check your newsletter and hopefully also email, it'll get emailed out and then on social media as well. So hopefully you won't, if you would like to take it, you'll have lots of places where you can find that. And the homepage of the website, thank you, Jen. So real quick, here are 2 of the 3 students you'll be helping if you choose to take the survey.
Hi, my name is Gabby Bennett. I'm an honors undergraduate student studying parks, recreation, and tourism. I'm originally from Bethlehem, Connecticut, and I want to thank you guys for taking this. Hi,
Hi, everyone. My name is Corinne Kohnberg. I'm a first-year master's student studying ecology and environmental sciences, and I'm from Farmington, Maine. And thank you all very much for taking our survey. Great, thanks a lot.
So if you know how to use a QR code, you can actually use your QR code reader on that symbol there, and that will take you straight to the survey on your phone. We're going to have a lunch break, and we're going to be pushing things back a little bit. We won't be coming back until closer to 1 o'clock when we're going to have our live auction. We have 9 items in the back of the room, and that is where you will have a chance to bid on any of those items. So come back around 10 of 1 or so, 1 o'clock. We will call you back to start the live auction with Jimmy Robbins. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So it's like you stop the bank. The bank is right here. It's 6 foot wall down like this. I have to see that. I ain't on the phone. Yeah, I can see the photo. Yeah, number 2. That table? We tweeted that. Oh, 50 to 30. Yep. There is a topic not doing it. Sorry, no. Literally, sorry. Thank you. You, believe it or not, I'm not just totally blowing smoke on this one.